Chapter 580. The people on top of the sinkhole had finished their discussion and were ready to go down to the bottom of the sinkhole to check if there were any rare treasures. Sinosaurus asked anxiously in a low voice, "What should we do? These people don't have good intentions, do they?" Wu subconsciously tensed up his body, killing intent leaking out from his eyes. He was ready to make a move, but it was hidden by the darkness. "Since they don't have good intentions, then we don't need to be polite with them," Tang Jing said calmly. He was also very curious about this group of people and wanted to find out who they were. How did he know that there were rare treasures in Changbai Mountain? "Then, let's do it," Sinosaurus asked expectantly and nervously. "Let's do it." Tang Jing smiled and nodded in confirmation. Swords have no eyes. Watch more and move less later. Sinosaurus patted his chest and said, "That won't do. We'll face difficulties together. How can I be a burden to everyone?" Whoosh! Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air descended from the sky. Although it was dark, one could still feel the fierce aura. Tang Zheng and Marshall were ready to take action. With a few peng-peng sounds, the few of them had already landed at the bottom of the pit. Lights lit up in their hands, illuminating the surroundings. Tang Zheng and the other two could no longer conceal themselves. "Ah!" Cries of surprise rang out everywhere. The newcomer looked at Bai Hen, then saw Tang Zheng and the others. "Who are you?" At the same time, the newcomers launched an attack on Tang Zheng's group. However, Tang Zheng and Marshall were waiting to attack, so they were faster than the other party by half a beat. Sinosaurus, on the other hand, was slightly slower as it was his first time fighting, so he attacked at the same time as the other party. In a flash, Tang Zheng and Marshall had already struck their chests. The other party rolled their eyes and fainted. Sinosaurus, on the other hand, was engaged in a fierce battle with another person. The mountain-shattering meteor hammer was extraordinarily powerful, and as he swung it, the air was shaken apart. The pressure of Mount Tai directly broke the long sword that his opponent had hurriedly thrust out, and then, with a flat swing, smashed towards his opponent's chest. However, the opponent was not easy to deal with. Like a swimming fish, he quickly retreated and dodged the attack. Then, he quickly fought with Sinosaurus. On the other side, Tang Zheng and Marshall were in completely different situations. After they knocked down two people, they wanted to launch a second round of attacks, but their opponent's reaction speed was far beyond their expectations. With a few swishing sounds, a few sword lights flew towards the two of them. This sword light was erratic and untraceable. It was incomparably gorgeous and was even brighter than the lanterns in their hands. Moreover, it was filled with boundless killing intent. Shwa! The war soul sword streaked across the black sky, and with a single move, the sky pit was filled with sand and rocks. Ping 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 ping, the sharp swords clashed, creating sparks from the friction. Kacha! With a crisp sound, a sharp sword broke into two, and then, cries of surprise sounded out. His sword techniques are so powerful. In terms of sword techniques, I want to see whose sword techniques can surpass my sword pavilions. Move aside, I'll do it. A cold shout sounded out, and a sword light suddenly rose from the darkness like the rising sun, piercing people to the point that they couldn't open their eyes. In the next second, the glaring sword light disappeared and everything returned to darkness. However, Tang Zheng could clearly feel a powerful sword intent rushing towards him. What a powerful sword technique! Tang Zheng was awestruck. This was the strongest sword technique he had ever seen in his life, and it was unknown how much more profound it was compared to Qin Lao's sword technique. At the same time, he firmly remembered the two words, sword pavilion, in his heart. He had never heard of these two words before, so he did not know what organization it was. Come on! Tang Zheng shouted, and the first to fourth moves of the Sky-Flying Immortal's sword technique were executed smoothly. In an instant, the sky pit was filled with sword light, and with the sound of explosions, the lights in everyone's hands completely exploded, and they fell into darkness again. Tang Zheng and his opponent exchanged a few moves in midair, and like a spring, they bounced off each other and disappeared into the darkness. In this confrontation, the two of them were evenly matched. Both of them could feel the strength of the other, especially in terms of attainments in the way of the sword. Everything fell into darkness again. The two of them were a few meters apart, and the sounds of fighting around them seemed to have disappeared. They only had eyes for each other. Although the darkness made it impossible for the two of them to see each other clearly, they could still feel each other's presence. "Who exactly are you?" the other party asked coldly. "And who are you?" Tang Zheng asked back. "Who taught you your swordsmanship? And who taught you your sword technique?" Tang Zheng asked. The two of them fell into a short period of silence. Obviously, they were very wary of each other, and neither of them was willing to reveal their confidence. "Then it seems that we can only know the answer after the victor is decided. Then let's see who is stronger and who is weaker." Tang Zheng's fighting spirit was aroused. With a tap of his foot, he rushed out again. The Dark War Soul sword seemed to have merged with the darkness. It was silent. If it was an ordinary person, they would not know that Tang Zheng had already made his move. However, the other party was not an ordinary person. By listening to the sound, the two of them already knew each other's position. When Tang Zheng made his move, the other party also made his move, and a thin long sword lit up. Yes, there was no light in the sky pit, but when he waved his sword, the sword's body lit up like a blazing sun, majestic and majestic. It was as if the sky pit had turned into a turbulent ocean. The others were like small boats in the ocean, drifting with the waves. A sense of powerlessness arose spontaneously. Sinosaurus smashed his opponent back with his hammer. He staggered and almost fell down. He could not help but exclaim, "Damn, this momentum is too great. OL3 is indeed valiant. OL3, do your best and defeat him." On the other hand, Marshall was able to deal with it with ease. Amongst these few opponents, other than the swordsman who was fighting against Tang Zheng, the rest were all weaker than her, so she was like a fish in water. She placed a lot of her attention on Tang Zheng and the mysterious swordsman. Even though she was usually quite conceited, she knew that she was not a match for this mysterious swordsman. Moreover, this person looked to be in his 30s, so he could be said to be a genius in using the sword. However, when she thought of the two words, sword pavilion, she was not surprised that the other party's sword cultivation was so high. It was because he was from Sword Pavilion, and the people who came from Sword Pavilion were so powerful. Moreover, these people all used swords, which meant that they were all from Sword Pavilion. However, this swordsman was completely different from the others. The others could not be considered as successors of Sword Pavilion. They could only be considered as sword slaves. Even though they were sword slaves, compared to ordinary cultivators, they were still rare experts. From this, it could be seen how powerful and mysterious Sword Pavilion was. Sword Pavilion was not famous in the Jianghu because it was too mysterious. Ordinary people would not know about it. However, as the disciple of the martial origin sect master, Marshall naturally knew about Sword Pavilion. The people of Sword Pavilion were all sword cultivators, but there were only 3 true successors of Sword Pavilion. The others were all sword slaves. However, this was not the most famous thing about the Sword Pavilion. The most memorable thing about the Sword Pavilion was the owner of the Sword Pavilion. He was the famous Sword God. The Sword God loved swords as if they were his life, and he was obsessed with swords. Back then, he defeated countless experts and became the Sword God. In the eyes of the world, there were people whose cultivation surpassed the Sword God, but no one's sword cultivation surpassed his because he was the God of swords, the most supreme existence. The successor of Sword Pavilion was the disciple of Sword God. However, Sword God was very strict when it came to accepting disciples. He only had 3 direct disciples in total. One could see how lucky these 3 disciples were in the eyes of the world. They had Sword God's teachings, so one could imagine how profound Sword Tao was. The swordsman in front of her was one of the 3 disciples of the Sword God. Therefore, Marshall was not surprised that his sword cultivation was so high. The sword god has more than one set of sword techniques, and this person cultivates the sunrise sword technique. It is said that the sunrise sword technique is a profound sword technique that the sword god comprehended when he observed the rising sun. The sword technique takes the great path of the rising sun. It is masculine and domineering, but it does not lose its vitality. TSK, I wonder if Tang Zheng's heaven-flying immortal sword technique or the sunrise sword technique is better. Marshall thought silently. Heaven-flying immortal against the rising sun. Tang Zheng and the successor of Sword Pavilion seemed to have become two swords, clashing in the darkness and creating intense sparks. The rocks on the walls of the sky pit rustled and rolled down, as if it was raining rocks. The battle of the others came to an abrupt end. Marshall split open a falling rock with her palm and shouted, "This sky pit will not last long. It will collapse soon. Hurry up and get out." Seeing such a large formation, Sinosaurus was flabbergasted, but he did not have the heart to continue fighting. He replied, "I'll be out soon." The tip of his foot tapped on the wall and used both his hands and feet to climb up. He was like a gecko, but his speed was not slow. "Hurry up." The successor of Sword Pavilion was worried about the safety of the sword servant and ordered loudly. The sword servant's figure flashed. Using his sword as a ladder, he scuttled up. His speed was much faster than Sinosaurus's giant gecko. Of course, the speed of these people was not as fast as Marshall. When Marshall was the first to stand outside the natural crater, he attacked the sword servant that was following closely behind. With a miserable cry, the sword servant fell into the natural crater and turned into minced meat with a bang. Following the same pattern, every time a sword servant came up, Marshall would rely on the advantage of geography and her own strength to kill them one by one. Not long after, no sword servant dared to come out. Everyone knew that there was a demoness above who killed without blinking. If they came out, they would die. But hiding in there was not a long-term plan, because Sinosaurus the giant gecko had climbed up. The mountain-shattering meteor hammer fiercely smashed on the wall of the pit, causing sand and rocks to fly. The wall that a person was holding on to crumbled and began a free fall. There was a wolf in front and a tiger behind. This group of sword servants was suffering. Moreover, the sounds of fighting in the sky pit were becoming more and more intense. The sky pit was in danger of collapsing at any time. At that time, if they were buried alive, they would not be able to survive. "Go all out, charge!" A sword servant gnashed his teeth and roared. He used all his strength to rush up into the sky. He waved the long sword in his hand, determined to fight for a glimmer of hope. But what welcomed him was Marshall's merciless attack. With a plop, he fell down. Bang bang bang. Marshall was like playing whack-a-mole, slapping down every sword servant that came out. Boom! Suddenly, a loud sound rang out. The sky pit collapsed and dust rose up. Marshall stood alone on the ground, looking at the sky pit that was covered in dust. Her expression slightly changed and she shouted, "Tang Zheng, Sinosaurus, where are you?" Chapter 581. Bang! A few rocks soared into the sky from the smoke and dust, and a burst of violent coughing sounded out. Damn, I was almost buried alive. Fortunately, I was lucky enough, and the mountain-shattering meteor hammer was powerful enough, so I was able to rush out of the sky pit. Sinosaurus muttered to himself with lingering fear. When the smoke and dust dissipated, Sinosaurus saw a person standing in front of him. He could not help but be startled and exclaim, "Why are you alone? Where's third brother?" Marshall looked at the ruins of the sky pit. Do Long immediately looked down at his feet, and was dumbstruck. "You're saying that OL-3 was buried alive?" Marshall did not comment, but his expression had already answered this question. She had originally thought that Tang Zheng would definitely rush out unscathed, but reality proved that she was wrong. If he's dead, then what about Master and Mistress? She panicked and immediately rushed towards the ruins, trying to break through the layers of obstacles to save Tang Zheng. Suddenly, a loud sound rang out as a huge mountain rock soared into the sky. Sinosaurus screamed and immediately jumped out of the ruins, looking at this scene in disbelief. So. Two figures soared into the sky along with the huge rock. Sword lights clashed in midair, causing intense sparks to fly. Bang! 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 A loud sound rang out, and the two of them were like two huge rocks smashing into the ground, sending pieces of gravel flying. They stood facing each other, their eyes shining as they looked at each other, their gazes not friendly. Your sword technique is actually so powerful. The successor of the sword pavilion exclaimed. He had never seen such a powerful sword technique in his life, and he really did not know when such a powerful sword technique had appeared in this world. Tang Jing chuckled, "You're not bad either." Someone from the sword pavilion, I presume that the sword pavilion is related to the famous sword god? Marshall looked at Tang Jing in astonishment, marveling at his reasoning ability. He actually guessed all of this from the sword pavilion and this person's sword technique. The successor of the sword pavilion was also surprised and asked, "Who are you? Why do you know so much?" Of course, Tang Jing didn't just rely on his deduction. When Tian Chanzi had fought with Sword God, he had mentioned it to him. Therefore, he knew how powerful Sword God's swordsmanship was. Although he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he still felt a sense of familiarity with the swordsmanship described by Tian Chanzi. Seeing his reaction, Tang Jing knew that he had guessed right. He said, "Your sword art is much better than the others. Could it be that you are the successor of the sword god?" "You guessed right, the sword pavilion master is the sword god, and this person is one of the 3 great disciples of the sword god. The sword god has a total of 3 mysterious disciples, namely greed, destruction and 7 kills, but I wonder which one is this?" Marshall interrupted. The successor of the sword pavilion was instantly moved. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Marshall, saying, "You are so young, but your cultivation is not low. Who are you?" Marshall smiled faintly. "The sword pavilion is unheard of among ordinary people, but I have heard many rumors about it. Moreover, there are many rumors about your master, the sword god. Back then, he was extremely famous, but in recent years, he has restrained himself. I don't know what he is doing." Obviously, martial arts information was more abundant and accurate than the sword pavilion. The sword pavilion had a super expert like the sword god, so why was it not included in the 3 great organizations? In fact, there were many reasons for this. The sword pavilion was not big, and although it had sword slaves, it was not many. It could not be compared to the 3 great organizations. In addition, the sword pavilion was very low-key, and it was very difficult to find its whereabouts in the Jianghu. Since you know about the sword pavilion, then you should know how powerful it is. Today, I, 7 kills, have killed so many sword slaves. If I don't ask for an explanation, how can I explain it to my master? So you are 7 kills. I have heard a lot about you. In this world, there are not many people who have seen 7 kills' true appearance. Marshall laughed. 7 kills coldly snorted and said, "Because most of the people who have seen it are already dead. The sword pavilion has always kept a low profile and basically does not care about the affairs of the world. Why did they come to the Changbai mountain this time? Furthermore, they are looking for some rare treasures. This is truly strange." Marshall said doubtfully. 7 kills' expression turned cold as he said, "The sword pavilion's actions are not something you can casually guess." However, Tang Zheng was also slightly moved. There must be a demon behind this abnormality. The mysterious sword pavilion had entered this mountain to search for rare treasures, which meant that this matter was not simple. As for how the sword pavilion found out that there were so many treasures hidden in the mountain, that was even more of a secret. These rare treasures were related to the magic treasure, so Tang Zheng could not let his guard down. Moreover, the other party had already found one, so it was even more necessary to get to the bottom of it. But asking like this would obviously not lead to any results, so Tang Zheng did not want to waste his breath. He pointed Battle Soul forward, the sword pointed at 7 kills, and said in a cold voice, Just now was just a warm-up. Now is the main course. I think we can determine the victor now. Tang Zheng could not see through the other party's cultivation, so the other party was at least a 7th grade Xiantian warrior. However, Tang Zheng was not worried because he was confident that he would win. He still had a trump card that he had not used yet. Of course, the trump card was not the 4 symbols venerables. Summoning the 4 symbols venerables would cause too much of a commotion. There were still people from the Sword Pavilion in the mountain forest. If the commotion was too great, it would attract other people or even the sword god. Even if Tang Zheng had the 4 symbols venerables, he still did not have the confidence to win. One had to know that the sword god had once fought with Tian Chanzi, and Tian Chanzi was not stingy with his praise. This was enough to show how high the sword god's cultivation in the sword Dao was. Moreover, if he used the 4 symbols venerables to deal with the Sword Pavilion's successor, then Tang Zheng felt that he was making a mountain out of a molehill. 7 kills had exchanged more than 100 moves with Tang Zheng, and had already guessed Tang Zheng's strength. Although the latter's cultivation in the sword Dao was high, it was on par with his own. One had to know that his Rising Sun sword art had already reached perfection. He did not believe that he could deal with Tang Zheng's mysterious sword art. Back then, when he had taken the sword god as his teacher, he had taken the initiative to choose this Rising Sun sword art. This sword art was indeed a perfect fit for him, and his sword arts had improved by leaps and bounds. He was only 30 years old, but this sword art had already reached perfection. Even the sword god had praised him before. I want to determine the victor and let you know that the Sword Pavilion's successor is not just for show. 7 kills said resolutely. Swoosh! He raised his hand and swung his sword down. Even though it was broad daylight, the light on the sword was incomparably bright. It carried the might of the rising sun and attacked Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng's mouth revealed a trace of a cold smile. He made a feint and blocked the sword. With a thought, a powerful Yin Qi rushed out from the War Spirit sword, and a huge monster pounced towards 7 kills. War Spirit. The War Spirit that had been sealed in the War Spirit sword was released by Tang Zheng. The War Spirit had been silent in the sword for too long, and Tang Zheng wanted to let it see the light of day again. Roar! The War Spirit roared towards the sky, and the Yin Qi in the forest was crazily absorbed by him. Then, his body became more and more condensed, just like a real person, except that his body was a little bigger. When Sinosaurus saw the War Spirit, he was frightened and quickly retreated. He cried out in horror, "What kind of monster is this?" The War Spirit was condensed from a ghost, and its face was somewhat sinister. Furthermore, it was too tall, and its body was surrounded by Yin Qi, emitting traces of black Qi. Its appearance was indeed not very good, but it was enough to scare people. 7 kills also trembled as he stared at the huge monster. Just now, he had seen the War Spirit fly out from Tang Zheng's sword with his own eyes, so the identity of the opponent was obvious. He looked at Tang Zheng in horror and asked, "You are a cultivator? We have been fighting for so long, and you only reacted now. Isn't your reaction a little too slow?" Tang Zheng said jokingly. "A cultivator dares to be so brazen, you are really daring. Today, I will let you know the position of a cultivator in this world. Since you have entered the wrong camp, then you have to tuck your tail between your legs." 7 kills' eyes burst out with a bright light. The rare treasure that he had found this time was related to cultivators, so his master had already warned him to pay attention to the whereabouts of cultivators. Today, he had coincidentally met a cultivator, and of course, he would not let him go. If he caught him and handed him to his master, it would be a great merit. Suddenly, his heart was restless, and he was even more determined to deal with Tang Zheng. However, the most important thing now was to deal with this huge monster. The War Spirit beat its chest and kept roaring, its voice shaking the surroundings. Then, with a tiger's pounce, it directly pounced on 7 kills. 7 kills did not retreat an inch, and the long sword in his hand danced with flowing light, intertwining with each other. It was so tight that the War Spirit could not get close to him. Peng peng peng. The war soul's fist smashed into the sword light again and again, causing the sword light to tremble incessantly. Every time the war soul's fist smashed into the sword light's fist would be cut in half. However, the war soul would heal the wound with lightning speed, and its fighting strength was still off the charts. The war spirit was like a tireless machine, punching again and again. Finally, with a crack, the sword light in front of 7 kills was destroyed. The war spirit pounced on him, but 7 kills did not panic, and stabbed out with his sword. Puff! The long sword pierced through the war spirit's chest and came out from its back. However, the war spirit did not seem to feel any pain, and its expression did not change. It stretched out its big hand and grabbed at 7 kills' head. If it hit, his head would explode into a bloody mess. At the critical moment of life and death, Chi Sha finally understood that this colossus was not as simple as he had imagined, so he hurriedly retreated. However, just as he took a step back, he cried out in his heart, because even though Tang Zheng was standing in front of him, there seemed to be something waiting for him behind him, causing him to feel uneasy. His senses were very sharp. With a flash of light, a snake-like rope wrapped around his waist and quickly wrapped around his arms. After a while, he was tied up by the rope like a big dumpling. There was no doubt that this was the power of the dragon trapping rope. Tang Zheng used the war spirit to attract the opponent's attention, and calculated the opponent's movements and position. Then, he used the dragon trapping rope to wait for the rabbit. Naturally, he caught the rabbit. Tang Zheng had no choice but to use such a strategy. This way, he could capture the opponent with the least commotion. Otherwise, with the opponent's strength, if he wanted to capture him alive, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. Wouldn't that be inviting help? Tang Zheng was not that stupid. Chapter 582. Chi Sha, now we can have a good talk. Ignoring Chi Sha's furious gaze, Tang Zheng smirked. Since when did a cultivator of your level appear in this world? Who are you? Chi Sha asked, gritting his teeth. You seem to be my captive right now. Of course, I should be the one asking you questions, not you. Otherwise, you will be in great pain. As soon as he finished speaking, the dragon trapping rope flashed and Chi Sha's bones cracked. Chi Sha's face twisted in pain as he screamed. After a while, the screams stopped. Chi Sha's veins were bulging and he was sweating profusely. How is it? It doesn't feel good, does it? Tang Zheng sneered. No matter what you ask, I will not tell you. Chi Sha's eyes were filled with murderous intent as he clenched his teeth and refused to back down. Ha, you have quite a backbone. No wonder you are the sword god's disciple. Tang Zheng purposely praised him. Chi Sha raised his head proudly when he heard the word, backbone. Tang Zheng sneered and changed the topic. He pretended to casually add, this time, your sword garret's large-scale operation must be led by your master, right? Of course. Chi Sha said without hesitation. But as soon as the words left his mouth, he suddenly realized that he had fallen into Tang Zheng's trap. He had clearly said that he would not answer any of Tang Zheng's questions, but he had inadvertently fallen into Tang Zheng's trap. You, despicable! Chi Sha roared in anger. Tang Zheng did not mind and smiled faintly. He thought that although these disciples of the sword garret were outstanding in the way of the sword, there was clearly something wrong with their heads. It was so easy for him to get information out of them. This information was undoubtedly very important to him. If the sword god was not in Changbai, then he could go all out. But since the sword god had come as well, then he had to be careful. Especially since he'd captured the sword god's outstanding disciple and annihilated those sword servants. 7 kills gritted his teeth in hatred. He rolled his eyes and said fiercely, Master is in the Changbai Mountains. He'll be looking for you soon. When that time comes, I'll see what use your insignificant magic can be. Perhaps my magic is really useless, but the rare treasures that your sword pavilion is looking for are all used by cultivators. What use do you have for them? Tang Zheng asked suspiciously. I fell into your trap just now. Do you think I'll still answer your question? 7 Kills asked mockingly. Tang Zheng didn't think much of it. Looks like you're not stupid. 7 Kills snorted coldly and looked death in the eye as he said, if you want to kill me or torture me, do as you please. Don't even think about trying to get information out of me. 7 Kills looked resolute and did not show any signs of wavering. Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. 7 Kills was a stubborn person. It would not be easy to get more information out of him. However, Tang Zheng was not willing to give up just like that. Sword Pavilion's operation this time was definitely not simple. He had to figure out the whole story. Marshall looked at Tang Zheng mockingly. Seeing him suffer, she felt an indescribable sense of pleasure. What, are you out of tricks? Tang Zheng turned a deaf ear to her words. His eyes flickered. Sinosaurus, however, could not bear to see his brother suffer. He quickly volunteered, third brother, let me do it. I want to see if his bones are harder than my mountain-shattering meteor hammer. Mountain-shattering meteor hammer. 7 Kills' pupils shrank as he stared at the weapon in Sinosaurus's hand. He remembered seeing a pit in the heavenly pit with the help of the light. Its shape was very similar to the mountain-shattering meteor hammer. Your mountain-shattering meteor hammer was found in the heavenly pit, right? 7 Kills asked loudly. Sinosaurus subconsciously pulled the mountain-shattering meteor hammer closer to his chest and asked, what does that have to do with you? Hearing this, 7 Kills was 100% sure that his guess was correct. He was overjoyed. After searching for so long, he had finally found a rare treasure. Brat, let me tell you. The mountain-shattering meteor hammer is not an ordinary magic weapon. With your little ability, you can only possess it. You will only bring disaster to yourself. Sinosaurus angrily glared at him and said, hey, what nonsense are you talking about? What disaster? I have the time meteor hammer. If God blocks me, I will kill God. If Buddha blocks me, I will kill Buddha. Why would I be afraid of a disaster? Humph, ignorant. 7 Kills disdainfully said, do you think the mountain-shattering meteor hammer is so simple? Sinosaurus suddenly had an idea and took the opportunity to ask, then tell me, what is so special about it? It. 7 Kills was about to speak, but suddenly closed his mouth and said, you want to trick me again? Let me tell you, it's not that easy. I won't be fooled. Sinosaurus angrily roared and was about to swing the mountain-shattering meteor hammer to smash the other into pieces when he was quickly stopped by Tang Zheng. Third brother, let go of me. This person has become a prisoner, but he is still so arrogant. It's too infuriating. If I don't teach him a lesson, he won't be honest. Sinosaurus angrily said. Tang Zheng patted him on the shoulder and said, calm down. Then, he rolled his eyes and said meaningfully, since you value the mountain-shattering meteor hammer so much, then this mountain-shattering meteor hammer must be more powerful than the treasure you found before. Nonsense, how can the mountain-shattering meteor hammer be mentioned in the same breath as the sword spirit? 7 Kills immediately retorted. Sword spirit. Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. What is the sword spirit? 7 Kills widened his eyes and exclaimed, You are trying to trick me again. You are too cunning. Hee hee, if you don't say it, then I can only squeeze a little bit of toothpaste. Tang Zheng coldly laughed. 7 Kills had already realized that the more he spoke, the more likely he would make a mistake. In terms of words, he was no match for Tang Zheng, so it was better not to say anything. He angrily snorted and then did not say a word. He only looked hatefully at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng was not willing to give up, so he used all his tricks to lure the other to speak. However, the other had already suffered a few losses and had thoroughly learned his lesson. He would not be tricked again. Tang Zheng was at his wit's end as he unwillingly gave a cold snort, thinking that this sword spirit was even more powerful than the mountain-shattering meteor hammer. Moreover, it was clear that the other party knew the origin of the mountain-shattering meteor hammer, so he must find a way to get to the bottom of it. Marshall coldly laughed and said, since you can't get anything out of him, then just kill him. Why waste your breath? Kill. Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. 7 kills was an enemy, and he had never been merciful to his enemies. However, if he directly killed him, then wouldn't all the clues be cut off? He thought hard and frowned. Looking at 7 kills' provocative eyes, he was not angry. Instead, he was abnormally calm. Killing the other party was very simple, but the key was to know the information. Suddenly, he had an idea. He pretended to be angry and said, 7 kills, do you want to die so easily? You are thinking too simply. In a moment, I will make you beg for death. 7 kills was unmoved. He disdainfully laughed and said, whatever you have, just come at me. Then you just wait. I guarantee that you will never forget it. Tang Zheng grabbed 7 kills, sealed his acupoints, removed the dragon trapping rope, and ran down the mountain. The other 2 did not know what he was thinking, so they could only follow. In front of them was a lake, which was completely covered by ice and snow. Just now, they had directly passed through the ice. Therefore, the 4 of them continued to walk through the layer of ice. When they reached the center of the lake, Tang Zheng stepped down and the layer of ice let out a cracking sound. With a gulu sound, Tang Zheng and Qi Sha disappeared from the surface of the ice. A huge hole appeared in the ice. It seemed that Tang Zheng had used too much force and directly shattered the ice. Tang Zheng exclaimed and subconsciously let go of 7 kills in his hand, and struggled to swim upstream. Whoosh, he finally came out of the water, but his hands were empty. There was no sign of 7 kills. Seeing this, Sinosaurus was shocked and said, where is 7 kills? How did he disappear? When he entered the water, he slipped. I don't know where he landed. However, don't worry. I sealed his acupoints and he can't move in the ice water. He will definitely die, Tang Zheng said confidently and loudly. This voice was like a loudspeaker, spreading to every corner of the lake under the ice. Marshall frowned and looked suspiciously at Tang Zheng, not knowing why he spoke so loudly. Sinosaurus did not think of this and nodded. That makes sense. If he can't move, he will definitely die in this ice hole. But it's a pity that I didn't get much useful information from him. Let's go. Tang Zheng urged. The 3 of them quickly left the lake. Tang Zheng quickly grabbed Sinosaurus. Second brother, stop. What's wrong? Let's watch a good show. Tang Zheng smiled mysteriously. Marshall finally realized and said, you deliberately broke the ice and let him fall in. This is deliberately giving him a chance to escape. No wonder you said those words so loudly. Tang Zheng gave a thumbs up and praised, smart, you even noticed this. Sinosaurus slapped his head and exclaimed in a low voice, third brother, you are really too cunning. No, too smart. This move of casting a long line to catch a big fish is too amazing. Casting a long line to catch a big fish, this was Tang Zheng's strategy. Since he couldn't get any useful information, he would change his method. He had purposely only temporarily sealed the other party's acupoints. As long as the other party tried his best to break through the acupoints, he would be able to regain his freedom. When he heard that Tang Zheng had left, he would definitely seize this opportunity to escape. Furthermore, he would definitely report this information to the Sword God immediately. Following the map, Tang Zheng would be able to find the Sword God. Although he was afraid of the Sword God's strength, the other party was in the light and he was in the dark. As long as he hid well, he wouldn't have to worry about being discovered by the Sword God. Then, he would have a chance to find out the other party's purpose for coming here, as well as the secrets he was hiding. In addition, Tang Zheng was also very interested in the mysterious sword spirit. A treasure that was even more precious than the mountain-shattering meteor hammer could indeed move Tang Zheng. One had to know that the mountain-shattering meteor hammer was a heaven-level magic treasure, so the sword spirit was definitely not inferior to it. Chapter 583. Kacha, a layer of ice at the edge of the lake broke, and a wet person climbed onto the shore. He looked around, but didn't find anyone suspicious. He shook off the water that had almost frozen into ice on his body and hurriedly circulated his energy. A burst of dense qi rose from his body. In the blink of an eye, the clothes on his body were completely dried by the power. This man was Qi Sha, who had survived the disaster. He looked fiercely in the direction where Tang Zheng had disappeared and gnashed his teeth. He thought to himself, when I find my master, I'll make you regret it for the rest of your life. Whoosh! He turned into a shadow and shuttled through the forest like a cheetah. However, he didn't notice that the three people were following him like ghosts. Wu turned his head and looked at Tang Zheng, as if silently praising his wise decision. The plan of casting a long line to catch a big fish had been carried out smoothly. Qi Sha headed north, toward the depths of the Changbai mountain. Sinosaurus followed the two closely and whispered, "The depths of the mountain are forbidden to us hunters." In the past, there were hunters who went to explore the depths of the mountain, but they often didn't return. Later, it was said that there were ferocious beasts and monsters, so no hunter dared to set foot there again. Tang Zheng looked at the trees that were getting taller and taller, and the snow that was already as tall as a person. It was clear that this was not a good place. This place was already considered deserted, but Qi Sha still didn't stop. It was as if he was stepping on snow without leaving a trace, only leaving shallow footprints on the white snow. Snow was falling from the sky, and soon, these footprints were covered by the white snow. Nature was the best at hiding people's tracks. This was also useful for Tang Zheng and the other two. They fell far away, and their tracks were perfectly covered. Suddenly, a cliff appeared in front of them. In this world of white snow, this cliff was particularly eye-catching. There was a cave on the cliff, but there were already many people with swords standing in front of the cliff. These people were sword slaves of the sword pavilion. They were all expressionless, like puppets, and vigilantly observed their surroundings. 7 kills stopped in front of the cliff, and the sword slaves all bowed to him. Then, he glanced up, and with a tap of his foot, he soared into the air along the cliff as if he was climbing a ladder. He arrived in front of the cave and quickly disappeared into the cave. Tang Zheng raised his palm. The three of them stopped at the same time and looked at the heavily guarded cliff and cave from afar. They couldn't help but look at each other and see the surprise and doubt in each other's eyes. He was happy that he had finally found the whereabouts of Sword Pavilion, but he was suspicious of why Sword Pavilion had gathered here. We outnumber them. What should we do? Could it be that a group of people would charge forward? Even if the sword god doesn't make a move, I'm afraid we won't be able to bear the consequences. Marshall said worriedly. What's there to be afraid of? That 7 kills wasn't Third Brother's match, and these sword slaves are even less of a match. Sinosaurus was bursting with confidence in Tang Zheng, so he spoke indifferently. Marshall rolled his eyes. The ignorant were truly fearless. Of course, Tang Zheng knew that his second brother was taking things for granted. It was easy to say, but not easy to do. You guys stay here. I'll go check it out. Tang Zheng muttered to himself and said. You're going alone. Wouldn't that be like a sheep entering a tiger's den? Sinosaurus immediately rejected him, shaking his head like a rattledrum. Marshall said without any explanation, I'll go with you. Although she would usually look forward to Tang Zheng embarrassing himself, at the critical moment of life and death, she would still stand together with Tang Zheng without hesitation. This was a matter of right and wrong. How could it be a child's play? Tang Zheng knew what the two of them were thinking and hurriedly comforted them. Listen to me. It's safer for me to go alone because I know illusions. With that, Tang Zheng disappeared in front of the two of them. Ah! Sinosaurus exclaimed and hurriedly covered his mouth, but his round eyes betrayed the shock in his heart. A strange expression flashed across Wu's face as he remained silent. OL3, this illusion technique is too awesome. Leave it to me in the future. If you go and peek at a beauty taking a bath, you won't even be caught. Sinosaurus exclaimed. Marshall immediately frowned, killing intent jumping in his eyes. Sinosaurus felt a chill on his neck and immediately shrunk his neck, saying embarrassedly, "I'm joking, don't take it seriously." Tang Zheng helplessly rolled his eyes at him and continued, "The sword god is most likely in the cave, so I used the illusion technique to investigate. And the two of you are not doing nothing. You have to monitor the surroundings. If you encounter any trouble later, you have to help me." Marshall was hesitant. The order she received was to protect Tang Zheng, but this time, she was clearly going against the order. However, Tang Zheng's words were reasonable, so she could not refute them. If she wanted to blame someone, she could only blame herself for not knowing how to use illusions. Sinosaurus gladly accepted the decision and immediately hid in the snow at the side. Using the natural camouflage of the snow, he stared at the cliff and the cave without blinking. Tang Zheng gave him a thumbs up. Although OL-3 was not serious at times, but at the critical moment, he did things cleanly and nimbly, not dragging his feet. Wu Zhuozhuo stared at Tang Zheng, and when their eyes met, Tang Zheng was not willing to be outdone. After a long while, Wu finally lost and muttered, "All right, but if there is any danger, immediately escape. We will help you." Tang Zheng made an okay gesture and truly used the illusion technique. In that instant, his figure floated, and in the blink of an eye, he completely disappeared in front of everyone, as if he was air. "He's gone." After Tang Zheng said this, the surroundings became completely silent. After a long while, Sinosaurus asked in bewilderment, "Did he leave?" Marshall snappily said, "Of course he left." Tang Zheng was like a ghost as he silently appeared in front of the cliff, facing the sword servant, but the sword servant still did not notice him. Tang Zheng was rather confident in his illusions. If he was unable to hide his tracks in front of these ordinary warriors, then his cultivation would have been wasted. However, he did not dare guarantee that his illusions would be effective in front of the sword god. After all, the sword god's cultivation was too high, and ordinary techniques might not be effective. He did not swagger, but carefully walked to the entrance of the cave. As soon as he entered, his eyes lit up. One by one, the sword servants stood at the entrance like sharp swords, each with a sword on their back, ready to attack. As long as they found any intruders, they would definitely kill them without mercy. Tang Zheng was calm, his emotions did not fluctuate in the slightest as he walked past these sword servants. The cave was not deep, and after walking for a while, it suddenly opened up. The mountain rock above his head disappeared, and was replaced by a huge sky pit. Yes, this cave was actually connected to a sky pit. This sky pit was not deep, so there was plenty of light, no different from daytime. But at this moment, Tang Zheng's attention was completely attracted by a scene in the middle of the sky pit. A white skeleton sat in the middle of the sky pit, and above its head floated a ray of light. The light would occasionally pulsate, and when it pulsated, a sharp sword intent would fill the entire sky pit. Tang Zheng really wanted to suck in a breath of cold air. This sword intent was too pure, several times purer than the sword intent he and Qi Sha had released. It was so strong that it made one's heart palpitate. Moreover, that pulsating light was like a short sword, but it was completely condensed from light and was not a real sword. Seeing this scene, Tang Zheng's mind went blank, and then two words quickly jumped into his mind, sword spirit. Yes, even though no one introduced the origin of this ray of light, Tang Zheng was able to determine its true appearance. Tang Zheng had long been used to this kind of inexplicable mysterious feeling. This was definitely the effect of Qi Yu's heart. Qi Yu's heart contained thousands of messages, and every time it was triggered, it would appear in his mind. The sword spirit in front of him had obviously met the triggering conditions, and a message followed closely behind. Qi Sha had said that the sword spirit was more precious than the mountain-shattering meteor hammer, and Tang Zheng had doubted it. After all, the mountain-shattering meteor hammer was already a heaven-grade magic treasure. But now that he saw the true appearance of the sword spirit, he did not doubt the authenticity of these words at all. This was because the sword spirit could no longer be measured by the grade of a magic treasure. It could not be considered a magic treasure, but the soul in the sword. There were many possibilities hidden in the sword spirit, and there was no fixed pattern. As long as it was used properly, it could unleash extraordinary power. This was a supreme existence to the two people who practiced the sword. This sword spirit was left behind after a divine sword was destroyed in the past, but the sword spirit did not dissipate. The sword spirit from ancient times had traveled through billions of years and was left behind until now. Moreover, it was still so powerful, which was enough to prove its original power and value. No wonder even the noble sword god covets the sword spirit so much, because its use is too great. I must obtain the sword spirit, and when the sword spirit is injected into the war soul sword, the war soul sword will undergo a qualitative change, and be reborn, just like a mortal becoming an immortal, and the war soul sword will also have the sword spirit, which is why it can be called a good sword. Tang Zheng became excited. This temptation was big enough. This time he had actually caught such a big fish, it was worth celebrating. In addition, who was that skeleton? Why was there a sword spirit floating above its head? Could it be that this person was a sword master when he was alive? However, this was not a problem that he needed to consider right now. He was not arrogant enough to directly rush up and snatch it. This was because his attention was attracted by another person. This person was thin and not tall. He was an old man with a white face and no beard, but his face could not be considered handsome. It was even a little ugly, and his legs seemed to be disabled. One of his feet was high while the other was low. This image was too inferior. If he did not see him in the sky pit, he would definitely think that he was an ordinary old man. However, seeing how respectful and careful 7 Kills was in front of the other party, Tang Zheng immediately realized the other party's true colors. Sword God, the famous sword god actually looks like this. Tang Zheng rolled his eyes, unable to accept this result. In his impression, the sword god was definitely a peerless divine sword. How could he be such an old man? It completely overturned the image of the sword god. Chapter 584. There were 2 people standing in the sinkhole, Sword God and Qi Sha. 7 Kills stood respectfully in front of the sword god and recounted what had happened to him. The sword god put his hands behind his back and stared at the sword spirit hovering above White Bone's head. His eyes were burning. When 7 Kills finished speaking, he turned his head and stared at 7 Kills. He asked, "You're saying that the opponent's sword Dao cultivation is very high? His sword art is very mysterious?" "Yes." Qi Sha nodded. He knew that his teacher was obsessed with the sword and would not ignore such a mysterious sword art. Even the rising sun sword art could not defeat him. Sword God asked again. Qi Sha said with shame, "This disciple is useless. I did not understand the essence of the rising sun sword art." Sword God shook his head, "Wrong. You already understood the essence of the rising sun sword art. It was just that the opponent's sword art was too mysterious, so you lost." Qi Sha's heart skipped a beat. Didn't this mean that the rising sun sword art was not as profound as the opponent's sword art? His master had always been very confident in his swordsmanship, but he actually admitted this on his own accord. This was too inconceivable. Sword God ignored his disciple's shock and said, "According to your description, I seem to have guessed the origin of the opponent's sword art." "What origin?" Sword God's eyes flashed with a look of reminiscence. He said, "A cultivator called Tian Chanzi. This person is his disciple." Tian Chanzi. 7 Kills' pupils couldn't help but widen. There was a period of time last year when it was the darkest for the sword pavilion, because the sword god's sword technique actually lost to a mysterious cultivator called Heaven Monk, and he was even injured. To the people of the sword pavilion, this was no different from a sudden clap of thunder. Many people were indignant, thinking that the Heaven Monk must have used some sort of scheme to win against the sword god. But sword god kept it a secret and did not talk about it in detail. No one knew the details. The cultivator that Qi Sha met this time was Tian Chanzi's disciple. Enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road. Qi Sha's eyes were filled with killing intent. He gritted his teeth and said, "This disciple is useless. I did not kill this person to avenge my teacher. When did I need you to stand up for me? I've lost face, and I'll get it back on my own. Besides, so what if I killed Tian Chanzi's disciple? This is only a method used by the weak. In fact, it doesn't have any substantial meaning. Sword God unexpectedly said. 7 Kills shivered. He understood that this was his master's usual style, but he still couldn't help but feel resentment. After all, his master had been defeated by Tian Chanzi, and even he had been defeated by Tian Chanzi's disciple. Could it be that his master and disciple were so unlucky that they would be forcibly suppressed like this? The sword god didn't care about his disciple's thoughts. Instead, he looked at the sword spirit with eager eyes and said, "As long as I fuse with the sword spirit, I will definitely be able to create a peerless divine sword. At that time, even if I face Tian Chanzi again, I am confident that I will be able to suppress him in the way of the sword." Qi Sha understood and said excitedly, "Then the heavens are truly helping master. After going through so much danger, we finally obtained the sword spirit. That Tian Chanzi won't be master's opponent in the future." The sword god laughed crazily. Tang Zheng's illusion technique wasn't seen through. He stood at the edge of the sinkhole, motionless as he listened to the conversation between the master and disciple. When he heard that the other party had seen through his identity, Tang Zheng was slightly moved. This sword god was indeed worthy of his reputation. Just from a few words, he was able to recognize the heaven-flying immortal sword technique. "Humph, you've met me and you still want to obtain the sword spirit. How can there be such a good thing?" Tang Zheng sneered as he stared at the sword spirit. If the battle spirit sword absorbs the sword spirit, its quality will definitely improve by leaps and bounds. Yes, this sword spirit must not fall into the hands of the sword god. I have to find a way to get it. The sword god and his disciple didn't know that someone had already lurked beside them. 7 Kills couldn't wait and said, "Master, then you should fuse with the sword spirit now, so as to avoid any more trouble." The sword god let out a long sigh and said, "This sword spirit has just broken free from its shackles, and is full of sword intent. It is extremely aggressive, and it is not easy to fuse with it at this moment. Master, there are really so many rare treasures in the 100,000 mountains. Why don't we just go to the 100,000 mountains and instead look for this escape?" 7 Kills asked doubtfully. "There is 100 transformation Star Lord in the 100,000 mountains. This person is mysterious and unfathomable. If we rashly enter the 100,000 mountains, it is very likely that we will not be able to return." The sword god explained. 7 Kills' heart trembled. Just who was this 100 transformation Star Lord? Even his master was so afraid of him. However, this was truly a pity that he couldn't personally go to the 100,000 mountains. Previously, there was an unforeseen event in the 100,000 mountains, and the restrictions were completely broken. These rare treasures broke free from their restraints and flew out of the 100,000 mountains, wandering all over Huaxia. This Changbai mountain is one of the places, and it took us a long time to confirm this point. That's why we spent so much effort to search for it. As expected, the heavens do not let us down, and we found it." The sword god sighed. When Tang Zheng heard this, he was shocked. He knew that the restrictions on the 100,000 mountains had been removed, but he didn't know that so many rare treasures had flowed out of the 100,000 mountains. Who knew how many divine weapons from the ancient era were buried in the prehistoric heavenly tomb? Back then, Tang Zheng didn't even have the time to search for treasures, but who would have thought that these treasures would actually run out and benefit the sword god? Since it's a treasure from the 100,000 mountains, then it's even more impossible for the sword god to take advantage of it. He had contributed greatly to the disappearance of the restrictions on the 100,000 mountains, so how could he let the enemy take advantage of him? Then why did these rare treasures fall into the sky cavern? Could there be a reason for this? 7 Kills asked like a curious child. The sword god shook his head, "I don't know for now." Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. He had almost overlooked this question. Could it be that there really was a mysterious reason behind this? But Qi Yu's heart did not give him an answer this time, so he could only suppress this thought in his heart for the time being. Since the sword god had said that the sword soul was overflowing with sword intent, was extremely aggressive, and was not easy to fuse with, then Tang Zheng did not have to worry about the sword soul falling into the hands of the sword god for the time being. However, another problem was placed in front of him. Since even the sword god was unable to do anything to the sword soul, what could he do? Looking at the rare treasures with his own eyes, but being unable to use them for himself, this kind of pain and torture was not good at all. Just as he was deep in thought, suddenly, a loud sword hum sounded out from above the sky cavern. Sword God and Seven Kills' expressions changed at the same time, and said, "Someone is coming." The sword god did not move, and ordered 7 Kills, "Go and send them away." "Yes, master." 7 Kills accepted the order and leaped up. He stepped on the inner wall of the sky cavern and climbed up the sky cavern, disappearing without a trace. Tang Zheng did not chase after him, but stared at the sword god. The sword god walked around the sword soul, and his expression kept changing. Suddenly, he pulled out the sword at his waist. This was a wooden sword, plain and dull. It did not have a scabbard, and it was casually inserted at his waist. Ordinary people who saw this wooden sword would think that it was not a threat at all, and could only be used as firewood. However, Tang Zheng definitely did not think so. The sword that the sword god wore so solemnly was definitely not simple, even if it was just a wooden sword. He was not wrong. This wooden sword was more famous than most of the famous swords in the world, and it was famous because of its owner. The sword god had used this wooden sword to defeat countless masters and reap countless lives. In the hands of the sword god, even a blade of grass or a tree was a divine weapon to kill people. The name of this sword was nameless, because it did not have a name at the beginning. It was just a piece of wood that the sword god found when he was young, and he polished it into a sword again and again. Then, an inconspicuous boy wielded a nameless wooden sword and defeated all obstacles, weathering countless winters and summers to create the illustrious name of the nameless sword. With the nameless sword in hand, the sword god walked around the sword soul even faster. Wang! With a sword hum, the nameless sword stabbed at the sword soul. Pang! A powerful sword, intense sword from the sword soul. The sword god took a step back, and the sword soul's pulsing light became even brighter. He glanced at the nameless sword in his hand, and then at the undamaged sword soul. He knew that his test had not succeeded. The nameless sword had not fused with the sword soul. Strange, how can I fuse with this sword soul? No matter how difficult it is, what do I have to fear? The sword god coldly shouted. Shwa, shwa, shwa. He stabbed 3 times in succession. Fast. It was too fast. Tang Zheng did not even see his movements clearly. The 3 swords stabbed at the sword soul in one go. The nameless sword pressed against the sword soul. It shook violently and retreated an inch, but the second sword arrived in an instant and rebounded a bit more. When the third sword hit the sword soul, the nameless sword completely negated the rebounding force and accurately pressed against the sword soul. The sword soul's light immediately enveloped the nameless sword, and the world was filled with terrifying sword intent. The sword god's eyes widened, and he shouted in pleasant surprise, "Fuse for me." Circulating his energy, the nameless sword's light became even brighter, pulsing continuously. Even the white skeleton was completely enveloped in it, mysterious and eerie. Tang Zheng's eyelids twitched, he cursed in his heart, the sword god was forcefully fusing with the sword spirit. If he succeeded, then Tang Zheng could only cry. Just as he was about to move, a figure suddenly appeared in the sky above the sinkhole. The figure rapidly fell and crashed into the ground, kicking up a large cloud of dust. Tang Zheng immediately suppressed his urge to attack. He looked at the person lying on the ground in shock. It was Qi Sha. Who was this person? Even Qi Sha was no match for him. The sword god glanced at Qi Sha and was indifferent. He continued to circulate his energy, trying to fuse the sword soul into the nameless sword. Whoosh! A person descended from the sky and landed at the bottom of the sinkhole. He shouted, "Sword god, stop!" The sword god was indifferent. He asked, Who are you? How dare you stop the sword pavilion? Do you want to die? The person snorted and said, so what if you are from the sword pavilion? Stop now, or your sword pavilion's sword slaves will be beheaded. Tang Zheng and the sword god looked up. The edge of the sinkhole was already filled with people. The sword pavilion's sword slaves were lined up in a circle, kneeling on the ground. Each of them had a sharp weapon on their neck, and they could die at any time. Chapter 585. The sword god glanced at the kneeling sword servant and frowned, you deserve to die for going against the sword pavilion. As soon as he finished speaking, he had no choice but to move away from the sword's soul and slash at the incoming person. A nameless wooden sword, a simple sword, descended from the sky. The sky seemed to darken. Before the sword arrived, the person's legs were already pressed into the ground by the immense sword will. The man raised both of his hands. With a flash of light and a loud crack, the man suddenly stopped and half of his body sank into the ground. The weapon in his hands turned out to be a stick. The stick had already been broken in two, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. A wisp of astonishment and pain flashed on his face while his veins bulged, yet he gritted his teeth and persevered. A simple sword strike was already so powerful. No wonder he was the sword god. Tang Zheng couldn't help but be speechless. If he were to fight against the sword god with his own strength, it would be like an ant trying to shake a tree, unable to withstand a single blow. To be able to block my sword, you are not a nobody. If you still don't report your name, then you will become a nameless ghost under my sword. Sword god coldly said. Do you not care about the life and death of the sword slave? The sword god coldly snorted and said, they are dead. With me taking revenge, none of you should even think about leaving this place. All of you will be buried with them. That is enough. The person who came was also a ruthless person. He roared, do it. Poof. Poof. Streams of blood sprinkled down from the top of the crater, as if it was raining blood. But sword god did not even blink. He just slashed again. The newcomer roared with all his might and soared into the sky. The broken rod in his hands met the nameless sword. Bang bang. With two snapping sounds, the rod was shattered into pieces. The tip of the sword slashed towards his forehead. In the next moment, he seemed to be about to be split into two. An expression of despair appeared in his eyes. He'd underestimated the sword god's strength and determination. Not only was this person a sword maniac, he was also a cold-blooded person. So many sword slaves were unable to make him hold back. The sword god was indeed a cold-blooded person. For the sake of pursuing an even more formidable sword Dao, for the sake of a higher cultivation, how could a mere sword servant make him stop? In his heart, the importance of a sword soul far surpassed the life of a sword servant. The man was filled with regret. He had been too reckless. He had rushed to the northeast as soon as he had received the news. Just as he had found out something, he had lost his life here. However, he was not afraid. Instead, he showed a resolute expression because he was a warrior of the country. Bang! With a loud sound, the war soul sword stopped in midair. The air violently fluctuated, and a long sword as black as ink was exposed in the air. However, this sword was suspended in mid-air without any support, as if it was controlled by an invisible hand. Everyone looked at this scene in astonishment. Even the sword god stopped in his tracks and looked suspiciously at the black sword that had blocked his attack. Xiuzhe. He suddenly frowned. Powerful. He actually followed 7 kills here. With just one look, he could tell that this sword belonged to the person who fought 7 kills, so he immediately figured out the whole story. 7 kills was lying on the ground, heavily injured, unable to move. He stared at Black Sword, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets. It turned out that he had fallen for Black Sword's trap and had led the wolf into the house. At the same time, he was filled with fear. He had been very careful along the way, but he had still been followed. Since you're here, why don't you show yourself? Why are you sneaking around? The sword god asked coldly. His voice echoed in the sinkhole like a sharp blade, stirring up every inch of space. Every word drilled into Tang Zheng's ears, as if it was going to explode his head. He endured the pain and did not show himself as the sword god wanted. This time, he had no choice but to lend a helping hand because the person who came was someone he knew, Suing Tian. Suing Tian was his ally, so he could not just watch as Suing Tian died under the sword god's sword. However, if he helped, it would be equivalent to exposing his whereabouts. If he wanted to catch him off guard, it would be even more difficult. Especially when he received the sword god's sword, he felt that his arm was about to break. The power of the sword god's sword was too great. You want to hide in front of me? Let's see if you have the ability. The sword god did not hear a response and bellowed in anger. With a slash of the nameless sword, the sky pit was filled with sword images, leaving no place to hide. Tang Zheng had no choice but to recall the War Soul sword. With a sound of ding-dang, beautiful sparks flew in all directions, and Tang Zheng's figure was forced to be exposed. Whiz! The sword god's figure flashed, and the nameless sword slashed towards Tang Zheng's direction. Tang Zheng gritted his teeth and used his sword to block, and with a crisp sound, Tang Zheng explosively retreated, his hands went numb, and the War Soul sword actually fell to the ground. At the same time, his illusion technique had completely lost its effect, revealing his figure. You finally appeared. The sword god glared at Tang Zheng like a tiger eyeing its prey. In front of him, there had never been a junior who dared to be so unbridled and not put him in his eyes. Suing Tian was suddenly startled as he looked at Tang Zheng in disbelief. No matter what, he did not expect Tang Zheng to be here and even save him from the gates of hell. This peck and drink was truly a fortuitous encounter. If he did not maintain a good relationship with Tang Zheng, then Tang Zheng would not have helped him no matter what. He could not help but rejoice that he made the decision to ally with Tang Zheng to deal with the Dragon Group. Not only was this beneficial to the National Security Bureau, it was also very important to him. You are Tian Chanzi's disciple. I want to see just how much you have learned from him. The sword god walked step by step towards Tang Zheng with killing intent between his brows. Tang Zheng waved his hand and the War Soul sword flew back into his hand. He held the sword horizontally in front of his chest and faced the sword god. He coldly said, since the sword god is interested in sparring with me, then of course I will not disappoint you. The ignorant are fearless. You are not your master, yet you dare to be so arrogant and condescending. The sword god disdainfully said. After he finished speaking, the nameless sword turned into a ray of light and slashed towards Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng readied himself for action as the flying immortals from heaven beyond heaven sword technique was displayed in a fluid motion. Only the sound of ding ding dang dang could be heard as Tang Zheng quickly retreated before fiercely crashing into the mountain wall, spitting out a large mouthful of blood. Tang Zheng wiped away the blood and looked at the calm and composed sword god who did not even take a breath. He deeply felt the gap between them. To be able to receive the sword god's sword was already the limit. To think more would be an extravagant hope. However, from these sword techniques, he also benefited a lot. The sword god's sword was filled with an unparalleled sword intent. It was truly a rare sword technique. Moreover, this sword technique was definitely not the rising sun, but another set of sword techniques that were even more profound. The sword god's sword techniques were outstanding, and he had more than one set of profound sword techniques. These sword techniques were all created by him, and he could truly be called a grandmaster of the way of the sword. Tang Zheng was unable to probe his opponent's cultivation, but without a doubt, he was an expert in the grandmaster realm. To defeat him was as difficult as ascending to the heavens, and he did not dare to have such extravagant hopes. Thus, the most important thing was to obtain the sword spirit and then escape. When Suing Tian saw that Tang Zheng was able to block several of his opponent's moves, he could not help but be secretly speechless. He had still underestimated Tang Zheng's strength. He was barely able to block the two sword strikes, but Tang Zheng was able to block all of them. The difference in strength between the two was obvious. Of course, he was more concerned about whether or not he could leave safely. The members of the National Security Bureau at the edge of the sinkhole saw that their director was in great danger, and some of them could not help but come down to help him. Seeing this, Suing Tian quickly stopped this stupid action through the headset. He could not have the attitude of the sword god who treated human lives like grass. He had to be responsible for his own members. However, Suing Tian's heart was also in turmoil. After all, the opponent was the sword god. It was still unknown whether Tang Zheng could escape with him. Tang Zheng had his back against the mountain wall. He had no way to retreat. A sickly flush appeared on his face as he stared at the sword god who was walking step by step. Looking past the sword god's shoulder, Tang Zheng locked onto the sword spirit. Suddenly, he thought of a plan and clenched his teeth. This time I will gamble. Whether I live or die will depend on my luck. A sword flew over, but Tang Zheng did not use his sword to block it. Instead, he waved his hands forward, and an aura of black clouds blotted out the sky and enveloped the sinkhole. The sword god's nameless sword attack came to an abrupt halt as it was blocked by a giant. The four symbols venerable raised a leg and stomped down. Boom! The sword god disappeared. The place he stood had already collapsed, and there was no trace of him anywhere else. It was as though he had been stepped on by the four symbols venerable. 7 Kills was stunned for a moment before he flew into a rage. I'll kill you and avenge master. Suing Tian's heart skipped a beat as he watched this scene in disbelief. Could the sword god have been stomped into minced meat so easily? Tang Zheng did not care about the sword god's life or death. He had to seize this rare opportunity to fuse with the sword spirit. With a flash, he arrived in front of the sword spirit. The battle soul sword stabbed at the sword spirit as a biting cold sword intent spread out in all directions. The sword spirit's light enveloped the battle soul sword and then enveloped the white bones below. The white bones emitted waves of white light. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. He could already feel a strong sword intent seeping into the battle soul sword. This seemed to be a fusion, and it was not as simple as he had imagined. Faster, faster. Tang Zheng's face revealed joy as he silently urged. Suddenly, the joy on Tang Zheng's face came to an abrupt halt. The sword spirit's light violently pulsed, extremely unstable, and with an explosive sound, Tang Zheng fiercely smashed into the mountain wall. Only then was he able to dissolve the power. The sword spirit returned to its original state, but there was an obvious change. A wisp of clear qi slowly rose from the white bones and floated above the sword spirit. The clear qi gathered and finally formed a person's face. This person swept his gaze over them and stared at them with an unfriendly gaze. He said coldly, "You want to steal my sword spirit, how can I let you do as you wish? Who are you?" Tang Zheng was overwhelmed with shock as he looked at the other party in disbelief. "Sword Spirit Master." The other party said arrogantly. "It was just a remnant soul." Tang Zheng curled his lips. His fiery eyes of truth immediately saw through the true identity of this wisp of clear qi. Chapter 586. The remnant soul had a dignified appearance. Even though it was just a remnant soul, it still had an imposing aura. He must have been an extraordinary person when he was alive. However, why would such a great figure be buried in the sinkhole and even leave his sword soul in the prehistoric heavenly tomb thousands of miles away? There were too many unknown secrets hidden within. Even if Tang Zheng racked his brains, he would not be able to figure it out. The person who stole my sword soul shall suffer the pain of 10,000 arrows piercing his heart. The remnant soul said sinisterly. Tang Zheng shivered inwardly. This sword soul was not a joke. The remnant soul's remaining power was not small either. If he were to control the sword soul, then Tang Zheng would not have a good time. Before he could think of a countermeasure, he heard a loud rumbling sound. The four symbols venerable staggered backwards and kicked his feet into the air. A figure jumped out from under his feet. Ah! Everyone looked at the figure that jumped out and could not help but cry out in alarm. This was because this person was the sword god who was previously thought to be stomped into meat paste. He actually did not die from the four symbols Venerable's kick. He only appeared to be in a sorry state. The nameless sword in his hand stood proudly as if it was going to pierce through the heavens. The four symbols Venerable fell backwards and crashed into the mountain wall with a loud rumbling sound. Mountain rocks fell with a crash as if it was raining rocks. The members of the National Security Bureau at the edge of the sinkhole could not stand steadily and almost fell into the sinkhole. The sword god raised his head and looked at the four symbols Venerable in an unruly manner. He said coldly, "You have more tricks up your sleeve than your master." But since you have a peerless sword art in your hand, instead of focusing on practicing the sword, you are wasting your time on these tricks. Today, I will let you know that small tricks are small tricks in the end. How can they be compared to the brilliant way of the sword? The sword god held his wooden sword and walked straight towards the four symbols Venerable. In this narrow space, the four symbols Venerable occupied most of the space. It was a huge monster, and the sword god was an insignificant little dot in front of it. However, as the sword god walked over step by step, his aura underwent a tremendous change. In the end, he was like a giant whose aura did not lose to the four symbols Venerable in the slightest. When Tang Zheng saw this scene, he was shocked. The sword god was indeed worthy of his reputation. He was fine even with this, but he was miserable. In front of him was the remnant soul, and behind him was the sword god. Either one of them was enough to make him suffer. The sword god glanced at Tang Zheng and the sword spirit and said disdainfully, "With your little ability, you want to meddle with the sword spirit? You are truly delusional. I'm not in a hurry to deal with you. I'll let you try to subdue the sword spirit first. I'll let you understand what an insurmountable gap is. There are many things in this world that can't be done by relying on brute force and self-righteousness." He would have to spend a lot of effort to fuse with the sword spirit, which was why he had the confidence to say such words. He believed that Tang Zheng simply did not have the strength to fuse with the sword spirit. This was the confidence of a sword Dao grandmaster who had devoted his entire life to sword Dao. He was more concerned about the four symbols Venerable One, as this was the greatest threat to him. That was why he drew his sword and attacked, preparing to use the nameless wooden sword in his hand to overturn this big guy. Whoosh! The sword god was like a shooting star as he streaked across the sky and pierced the four symbols Venerable One's chest. As expected of the sword god, he truly had sharp eyes. In just one exchange, he had actually seen through the four symbols Venerable One's weakest point. The four symbols Venerable One's chest was its life gate, so with one strike, a white dot appeared on its chest. That was the mark left behind by the nameless sword. The four symbols Venerable One had originally wanted to take a step forward, but was suddenly pushed back by this strike. It was tightly pressed against the mountain wall, unable to move. Tang Zheng's gaze turned cold. He temporarily gave up on the sword spirit and focused all his attention on controlling the four symbols Venerable One. Seeing the sword god attack again, the four symbols Venerable One hurriedly threw out a few punches. Ding Dang did not stop as she blocked the nameless sword. Fortunately, the four symbols Venerable One was impregnable. The sword god would not be able to harm its foundation for a while. However, Tang Zheng did not have absolute confidence that the four symbols Venerable One could withstand the sword god's repeated attacks. If something were to happen to the four symbols Venerable One, he would really regret it to death. The losses would outweigh the gains. The sword god curled his lips in disdain. "Your skin is thick. Looks like it'll take some effort." Before he had even finished speaking, the sword god launched another fierce attack. In such a narrow space, the four symbols Venerable One's movements were inconvenient. Meanwhile, the sword god was like a specter, leaping up and down. The four symbols Venerable One could only block a portion of the attacks. Most of the time, it was on the receiving end of the attacks. Tang Zheng clenched his teeth. However, he could not help but sigh inwardly as he accepted reality. If they were on flat ground, the four symbols Venerable One would not be so passive. However, things did not go as he wished. If he did not hurry up and leave, then he would have to think of a way to fuse with the sword spirit. Otherwise, this trip would have been a waste. Even if he could not fuse with the sword spirit, he could not let the sword god benefit so easily. His gaze once again locked onto the sword spirit and the remnant soul. The remnant soul laughed mockingly. I've let you live long enough. Obediently accept your death. As soon as it finished speaking, the radiance of the sword spirit pulsed and flickered violently. Every time it flickered, dozens of sword intents would spread out. Before long, this small space was filled with thousands of sword intents. It really felt like thousands of arrows were piercing through one's heart. Tang Zheng's expression changed abruptly. This remnant soul was more powerful than he had expected. He hurriedly used his sword to block. However, the thousands of swords had already arrived before him. With a series of bangs, they broke through his defense and reached his body. Tang Zheng's blood flowed rapidly as if it was about to boil. His heart beat violently as if it was about to burst out of his throat. Suddenly, a stream of blood flowed out from his heart. It rapidly flowed to his brain and filled his eyes. In the next second, his eyes became scarlet red like two scorching suns. Sword servant, how dare you? Tang Zheng shouted angrily. However, his voice seemed to have changed a lot. It was not Tang Zheng's original voice at all. The thousands of sword intents stopped in front of Tang Zheng. The remnant soul was suddenly startled and revealed a panicked expression. It looked at Tang Zheng in disbelief and asked with trepidation, "You, who are you?" Suing Tian had been paying attention to Tang Zheng. When he saw this scene, his expression became strange. Qi Sha looked as if he had seen a ghost. He was a swordsman and naturally understood how terrifying the thousands of arrows piercing through one's heart were. He originally thought that Tang Zheng was definitely going to die. Unexpectedly, there was a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. This strange change had occurred and he was overwhelmed. Tang Zheng looked at the remnant soul and said arrogantly, "Who do you think I am?" "Master." The remnant soul hesitated for a moment and finally cried out as if it had awakened from a dream. It quickly knelt down in front of Tang Zheng and prostrated itself on the ground. "Master, the sword servant finally sees you again." The sword servant thought that he would never see you again. The heavens really have eyes. "Master, you are still alive." The remnant soul was extremely excited and cried bitterly as it spoke. "Humph," crying and wailing. "Where is your decency?" Tang Zheng reprimanded without any trace of politeness. "Yes, master's reprimand is very good. The sword servant does not dare to do it again." However, the sword servant's body has long since disappeared and only this remnant soul is left. "I am unable to serve master," the remnant soul said regretfully. Tang Zheng shook his head and said, "Who says I can't? I want to fuse with your sword spirit. From now on, you and the sword spirit will become one." The remnant soul was startled and immediately became overjoyed. "Thank you, master, for giving the sword servant another chance." Seeing this scene, Qi Sha's courage was already splitting. He realized that something was wrong and impatiently shouted, "Master, this brat is about to fuse with the sword spirit. Hurry up and stop him." When Suing Tian heard this, he was unable to help at all. His skills were unable to withstand a single blow from the sword god. Moreover, he was heavily injured just now. However, he was also unable to understand the changes in Tang Zheng. However, one thing was certain, this brat was far more mysterious than he had imagined. He would always inadvertently give people a huge surprise. The sword god had already left dozens of white spots on the four symbols venerable's body, especially on his chest. If this continued, the door on the four symbols venerable's chest would really be broken. When he heard his disciples' cry of alarm, the sword god hurriedly glanced over and his expression immediately changed. He realized that something was wrong. He abandoned the four symbols venerable and dove down, rushing towards Tang Zheng like a cannonball. Tang Zheng did not even look, but extended his war soul sword and pierced it into the center of the sword soul. Immediately, the sword's soul erupted with a brilliant light, and the remnant soul also entered the sword's soul. The light wrapped around the war soul's sword, and in the end, even Tang Zheng was bathed in it, emitting a mysterious aura. Whiz! The light disappeared, the sword's soul and the remnant soul also disappeared, leaving only the war soul sword quietly floating in the air. The war soul sword didn't seem to have changed at all. It was still as black as ink and unremarkable as before. The sword god had already arrived behind Tang Zheng, but Tang Zheng did not turn around at all. He only grabbed the war soul sword and gently slashed backwards. Heaven flying immortal sword technique. However, it was not the first 4 moves, but the 5th move, return to origin. This move was truly ordinary, like a baby raising a toy sword and waving it weakly. Tang Zheng had already practiced the first 4 moves for some time, but he never thought that he would be able to master the 5th move today and use it. There was no world-shaking aura, making people wonder if this was really the mystical sword technique of the heaven-flying immortal sword. Even the sword god suspected that the other party's sword was purely teasing him and could not hurt him at all. Therefore, he was not afraid at all. With a mighty aura, he slashed out with the nameless sword. Clang! There were no fancy movements, but time and space seemed to have stopped for a moment. Then, the sword god roared, his beard and hair fluttered, like a crazy beast. He took a step forward and stabbed the nameless sword into Tang Zheng's chest. However, a terrifying power came from the tip of the sword, causing him to be unable to move forward at all. Instead, he was like a meteor streaking across the sky, smashing into the mountain wall with a boom. The corner of Tang Zheng's mouth curled up into an unfathomable smile, his finger gently stroked the 3-foot-long peak of the war soul sword, and said, "Only with a unique sword soul can it become a divine sword. From now on, the war soul sword has the possibility of becoming a divine sword." There was a look of satisfaction between his brows. When Suing Tian and Qi Sha saw this, their eyeballs almost popped out, and their mouths could be stuffed with a rock. What the F***ck was going on? Tang Zheng actually defeated the famous and aloof sword god in one move? This was too ridiculous. Chapter 587. Tang Zheng stood proudly, holding his sword with one hand, the scarlet-red color in his eyes gradually disappeared, returning to his normal state. With a sudden quiver, he regained consciousness and looked at the large crater in the mountain wall in shock, the crater created by the sword god. What's going on? Tang Zheng was dumbstruck, he completely did not remember what had happened before. Why did all of this turn out like this? You're too amazing. Suing Tian gave him a heartfelt thumbs up. Tang Zheng blushed with shame. How am I amazing? This has nothing to do with me, okay. Before his doubts were resolved, his attention was quickly attracted by another matter. His eyes burned as he stared at the war soul sword in his hand. When did the war soul sword become a heaven-level magic treasure? Sword spirit. Suddenly, he discovered that there was one more thing in the war soul sword. It was as if the war soul sword had a soul and its own consciousness. Master. A voice sounded in his mind. He was shocked and asked, "Who are you? Why are you in my mind?" Back then, Tian Chanzi lived in his mind, once bitten by a snake, 10 years afraid of a well rope, thinking that someone else had lived in his mind. Master, I am the sword spirit of the war soul sword. Sword spirit, you are the sword spirit from before? Not entirely, I have fused with that sword spirit, the sword attendant and the original war soul sword. I am a brand new sword spirit, Master's sword spirit. The other party respectfully explained. Tang Zheng only understood half of it. After thinking for a while, he guessed that the sword attendant was probably the remnant soul. But why did all of this happen? Didn't the remnant soul use the 10,000 arrows piercing heart technique to end his life? Tang Zheng quickly threw this question to the sword spirit, but heard the sword spirit say, Master, my previous memories have been completely erased, my memories will start from now on. Tang Zheng sighed helplessly, no one could give him an answer. Bang! A loud noise interrupted Tang Zheng's thoughts. The sword god rushed out of the pile of stones in a panic. His body was covered with dust, and there was still blood at the corner of his mouth. He was looking at the nameless wooden sword in his hand in panic. He stroked the sword with resentment and said, "How could this be? How could this be?" A crack appeared on the nameless sword. It was very small, but it was very obvious. Qi Sha looked at the crack in horror. Ever since he could remember, he understood that although the nameless wooden sword was not an invincible peerless divine weapon, in the hands of his master, it was absolutely no less than a peerless divine weapon and would never be damaged. That seemingly simple strike had actually cracked the nameless sword. This was enough to turn his worldview upside down. The sword god's emotions were not much calmer than 7 kills. His accessory had been with him his whole life, but now, a crack had appeared on it. He suddenly raised his head and stared at Tang Zheng with mixed feelings. His eyes kept changing. He said, "How did you do it?" Although Tang Zheng did not remember what had happened, with his intelligence, he immediately guessed a thing or two. Of course, he would not be stupid enough to expose himself. Instead, he pretended to smile mysteriously and did not speak. This smile made the sword god's heart uneasy. He had seen Tian Chanzi's power. As the saying goes, the pupil surpasses the master. The disciple might be stronger than the master. As for the issue of age, the sword god had never believed that age could determine the level of cultivation. He would not be surprised at all if a 3-year-old child was stronger than an old man. Therefore, after thinking about it, the sword god did not suspect anything else. He thought that Tang Zheng had deliberately concealed his strength and had no choice but to explode in the end. However, the strength revealed by this explosion moved him and he did not dare to underestimate it. Although the sword god was unwilling, the sword spirit had already merged into the war soul sword. Even if he coveted it, there was nothing he could do. Facing the sword god who was eyeing him covetously, Tang Zheng's mood did not fluctuate at all, nor was he afraid. At most, he would continue to fight. He had experienced too many dangerous situations and had long been trained to remain calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. This kind of reaction made the sword god hesitate. The sword god weighed the pros and cons and finally gritted his teeth. "I will remember your face. Next time, I will ask for your advice." After that, he grabbed 7 Kill's collar and jumped to the edge of the crater. The members of the National Security Bureau wanted to surround him to keep him, but he did not even look at them and walked forward. Seeing this, Suing Tian quickly ordered his subordinates to retreat. After all, the other party was the sword god. Although he was inexplicably scared away by Tang Zheng, if others wanted to stop him, they would be courting death. The figures of the sword god and his disciple had disappeared, but the crater was still terrifyingly quiet. Suing Tian looked at Tang Zheng and did not know how to organize his words for a long time. Tang Zheng was the first to break the silence. "Director Su, why are you looking at me like that? There are no flowers growing on my face." Suing Tian smacked his lips and said with lingering fear, "All of this is more unbelievable than flowers growing on your face." After a slight hesitation, he asked, "How did you do all of this?" "I still don't know." Tang Zheng spread out his hands and said helplessly, "Don't play dumb. Everyone isn't blind, and they saw it clearly. You forced the sword god to retreat with a single strike, and you even put him in an extremely sorry state. There are very few people in this world who can do this." Tang Zheng smiled bitterly. "You have known me for a long time. If I were really so powerful, would I let you mediate the matter of the dragon group? I would have killed Xing Feng in the dragon group long ago." Suing Tian looked at Tang Zheng doubtfully and admitted that what he said was true. Moreover, according to his investigation of Tang Zheng, although his overall strength was very strong and even the Chu clan master fell in his hands, that was with the help of the 4 symbols venerables. But just now, Tang Zheng only relied on the sword in his hand to force the sword god to retreat. Moreover, the sword god's strength was far above the Chu clan master's. If he did not see it with his own eyes, he would definitely think that it was a fantasy. But how do you explain what happened just now? Suing Tian broke the clay pot and asked. You ask me, who should I ask? Tang Zheng smiled bitterly. Just now, you seem to have changed into a different person. Even your eyes became scarlet red like the scorching sun. Did this happen to you before? Su Yingtian asked with a frown. No. However, you also said that I seem to have changed into a different person. Maybe it was the effect of the sword spirit and that wisp of remnant soul. What if it was him possessing my body? Tang Zheng made up a story. That's not right. That remnant soul clearly called you master and even said that he was some sword attendant. Don't try to fool me. Su Yingtian was very smart. How could he be so easily fooled? Tang Zheng spread out his hands and said, in any case, I don't know. I don't have the answer you want. Su Yingtian looked at him without blinking. He wanted to distinguish the truth of his words, but in the end, based on his experience, Tang Zheng was not lying. He really did not know what had happened just now. Tang Zheng did not know, but he had already guessed a thing or two. Since that remnant soul called him master and he lost consciousness, there was only one explanation. That was, in that instant, he was controlled by a mysterious force. Moreover, this mysterious force was activated in his body. After thinking about it carefully, it was not difficult to think of the mysterious Qi Yu's heart in his chest. Not only did it recognize the sword spirit at a glance, it also had many mysterious performances in the past. It was simply full of misdeeds. Could it be that the master of the sword attendant is Qi Yu, and Qi Yu's heart controlled my consciousness at the critical moment, causing me to transform into Qi Yu, which is why the sword spirit and war soul sword fused together? Looking at the dark war soul sword and feeling the surging sword intent contained within, Tang Zheng could not hide his excitement. Heaven-level magic treasure, he finally had a heaven-level magic treasure, and it was an offensive magic treasure. In the future, his fighting strength would greatly increase. Qi Yu's heart saved my life and even gave me such a big gift, but why do I still feel nervous? If Qi Yu's heart were to control me again, wouldn't I become a puppet? Tang Zheng's head tightened. Although Qi Yu's heart had many benefits, this disadvantage caused his heart to turn cold. Qi Yu's heart, what exactly do you want? Tang Zheng asked. There was no answer, leaving him helpless. Seeing that he was worried, Su Yingtian asked curiously, what are you thinking about? Tang Zheng came back to his senses and was not prepared to tell the other party about this matter. Qi Yu's heart was his secret, and even if there was danger, he would not easily tell others. Nothing. Tang Zheng pretended to be calm as he replied, and changed the topic without leaving a trace. Why did your National Security Bureau come here? We received information. Before Su Yingtian could finish rushing, two people rushed into the sky cavern from the cave and shouted, Tang Zheng, what happened to you? Wu and Sinosaurus were extremely anxious. When they saw Tang Zheng, the two of them rushed in at the same time. Sinosaurus hugged Tang Zheng and fiercely patted his back, saying, OL3, you really scared me to death. Just now, we heard such a big commotion here, we were all worried to death about you. Wu, on the other hand, instantly regained his calm. He was calm and collected, as if nothing had happened. It was completely different from his anxious appearance just now. Didn't I tell you to wait? Why did you come here? We're worried about you, especially this great beauty. She's even more worried, and she heard such a big commotion. If we only hide in the distance, what kind of brothers are we? Brothers have to share hardships. Sinosaurus said straightforwardly. Tang Zheng glanced at Wu. Under his calm appearance, there was an anxious and urgent thought, which was seen through by Tang Zheng. He couldn't help but feel a warmth in his heart. This woman had a sharp tongue but a soft heart. She usually liked to sing against him, and because of many complicated reasons, she didn't even have a good expression towards Tang Zheng. He didn't expect her to be so worried about him. This worry came from the bottom of his heart, and Tang Zheng could see it with a single glance. If you don't die, then consider yourself lucky. You escaped from the hands of the sword god. Wu said snappily. Chapter 588. Suing Tian recognized Marshall, but Sinosaurus was an unfamiliar face, causing him to be unable to figure out the other party's background. Why did you suddenly come to Changbai Mountain? Suing Tian asked suspiciously. My classmate is sick, so I came to take a look. I also came to enjoy the scenery of Changbai Mountain. Tang Zheng answered first. He did not wish for the matter of the mountain-shattering meteor hammer to be made public. Suing Tian glanced at Sinosaurus and said, I remember that you have already started school, yet you still have the mood to travel. You are truly in a good mood. After experiencing so many things, shouldn't you let yourself relax? On the other hand, didn't you just say that you came here because of the information? What exactly is the information? Island Nation has people coming to the northeast and seems to be on the move. I came to investigate their purpose, but I didn't expect to find traces of Sword Pavilion. Could it be that Island Nation and Sword Pavilion are both here for the Sword Spirit? Suing Tian explained. Island Nation. Tang Zheng's eyelids twitched. He had already clashed with Island Nation several times. This country was not easy to deal with. They had always been scheming and would definitely not shoot without aim. Since the other party had come to the northeast, then they must have some sort of plan. As for whether or not they came for the Sword Spirit, he was not sure. Have you found the Island Nation? Tang Zheng asked. Su. Ying Tian shook his head regretfully. During the invasion war a few decades ago, Island Nation occupied the northeast region and conducted a detailed exploration of this region. They are extremely familiar with the terrain, so it is extremely difficult to find them hiding in this region. Tang Zheng's heart darkened. The war that year was the shame of Huaxia. Every Huaxia person would never forget it. Since you haven't found it, what are you going to do next? Tang Zheng asked. If he could help, then he would naturally spare no effort. I've already sent people to investigate. Where's the Sword God? Marshall did not care about the schemes of the Island Nation. He looked around at the tragic scene and asked curiously. He was scared away by Tang Zheng, Suing Tian said. Marshall's eyes widened in disbelief, scared away by him. How is that possible? You don't even have a draft if you want to lie. Suing Tian shrugged and didn't continue to explain. Tang Zheng naturally wouldn't do anything unnecessary. He cupped his hands towards Suing Tian and said, then we'll go first. We'll contact you when we return to Beijing. You have offended Sword Pavilion this time. You have to be more careful in the future, said Suing Tian. Tang Zheng smiled bitterly and said, I'm not afraid of the itch anymore, and I don't care about the Sword Pavilion. You sure are magnanimous. Suing Tian shook his head. If it was anyone else, they would have been scared out of their wits. Only Tang Zheng was so magnanimous. Tang Zheng put the 4 symbols venerables into his sumru pouch and the 3 of them left the sky cavern together. When they couldn't see the people from the National Security Bureau, Sinosaurus poked Tang Zheng's waist and asked curiously, who are they? The National Security Bureau. Wow! Sinosaurus cried out in surprise, his mouth wide open, the legendary National Security Bureau. They're in charge of national security. They're not ordinary people. You actually have connections with them. Too awesome. Tang Zheng smiled faintly and said, they're also ordinary people. They're not that extraordinary. Do Long clicked his tongue in admiration, OL3, your realm is not ordinary. If others knew, they would be scared to death. Don't tell anyone about what happened today. Tang Zheng warned. Sinosaurus patted his chest and promised, don't worry, I won't say it even if you beat me to death. What happened in the sky cavern earlier? Marshall asked. Didn't Suing Tian tell you? If you don't want to say it, then don't say it. Why are you lying to me? Marshall said snappily. Tang Zheng felt wronged and rolled his eyes, not knowing what to say. Where is the Sword Pavilion? Tang Zheng changed the topic and asked. Marshall shook his head. Although the martial sect's strength is extraordinary, we still don't know where the Sword Pavilion is. The Sword Pavilion is no less mysterious than the martial sect. Do you understand? Suddenly, she rolled her eyes and asked, "Are you asking this question because you want to kill your way to the sword pavilion?" Tang Zheng rubbed his nose and said with a mysterious smile, "I really do have such a plan." Boasting shamelessly, "You're simply courting death." Marshall rolled his eyes and impolitely evaluated. Tang Zheng did not explain further. He was not lying, but he was not stupid enough to kill his way to the sword pavilion. Instead, he was prepared to call Tian Chanzi to meet the sword god. In the sword pavilion, the sword god was the most respected. He had 3 direct disciples under him, which was the most terrifying power. As for the sword slaves, although their swordsmanship was not bad, they were not a threat to Tang Zheng. But since he had already formed an enmity with the other party, then Tang Zheng would naturally consider completely eliminating this hidden danger. As night fell, the 3 of them walked out of the vast mountains and saw the village from afar. Smoke curled up from the chimneys and the families were already preparing dinner. My house hasn't started yet. There's no smoke coming out of the chimney. Sinosaurus raised his head and muttered in bewilderment. Maybe they've already prepared dinner and are waiting for us. Tang Zheng laughed. When he stepped through the courtyard door, the smile on his face suddenly froze and he stopped in his tracks. "What's wrong?" Marshall asked with a frown. Tang Zheng's face became extremely serious, and said in a deep voice, "Something's wrong." "3, don't be so suspicious. We're already home, what could be wrong?" Sinosaurus disagreed and walked into the courtyard with large strides. "Second brother, be careful." Tang Zheng wanted to pull him back, but it was already too late. So. Out of nowhere, enemies dressed in black appeared. They were tightly wrapped, leaving only a pair of eyes exposed. Not only did these black-clothed men block their path, they also blocked their path of retreat outside the courtyard. They attacked from the front and back, eyeing them covetously. "Who are you? Why are you in my house?" Sinosaurus asked in anger. Tang Zheng and Marshall quickly joined up with Sinosaurus. The 3 of them faced the black-clothed men and did not back down. However, Tang Zheng also muttered in his heart. How could there be such ruthless people in this unknown village? Without a doubt, these black-clothed men were not good people. Every one of them had a faint smell of blood on them. It was obvious that they had seen blood before. Just now, Tang Zheng had sensed the faintly discernible smell of blood, which was why he was alert. When the black-clothed man heard Sinosaurus's question, he did not answer and instead asked, "Which one of you is Sinosaurus?" They were actually here for Sinosaurus, which was truly unexpected. "I am Sinosaurus. Who are you people?" Sinosaurus took a step forward and asked. "It's good that it's you. Obediently hand over the thing you obtained. Otherwise, you won't be able to keep your little life." The black-clothed man said with a murderous aura. "What thing?" Sinosaurus was confused. "The thing you obtained in the Changbai mountain." The black-clothed man said with certainty. When the 3 of them heard this, their hearts were greatly shaken. How did these black-clothed men know that Sinosaurus obtained something in the Changbai mountain? Even the National Security Bureau and Sword Pavilion did not know about this. Just what kind of background did the other party have? Tang Zheng took a step forward and calmly said, "We do not know what you are talking about." You don't know. Then let's see if he can remind you." The black-clothed man waved his hand and another black-clothed man walked out with an old woman. "Shaman." The 3 of them were shocked. The other party had actually captured the shaman. Previously, the shaman had suffered a great loss at the hands of Tang Zheng and had become a fool. They did not expect that she would fall into the hands of these people. The shaman's eyes had already regained consciousness. It was clear that the black-clothed man had used some unknown method to heal her. Her eyes were spitting fire as she looked at Tang Zheng and the other 2. Her voice was hoarse as she shouted, "It's them. The thing you want is in their hands." The 3 people's expressions suddenly changed. Sinosaurus angrily said, "Shaman, not only did you want to harm my family, but now you instigated these criminals to come to my house. What do you mean by this? You broke my shaman's technique. I will make you beg for death. The shaman viciously said. Tang Jing frowned. He had let her live, but she did not repent. She had even caused trouble for them. She really deserved to die. Now you have nothing to say. Hand over the thing and I'll let you live. The black-clothed man aggressively said. I don't have what you want. Even if I did, I wouldn't give it to you. Sinosaurus raised his neck and said without backing down. Stubborn. It seems like you don't even care about your family. The black-clothed man waved his hand and several people escorted out 3 people who were tied up like rice dumplings. Their bodies were clearly injured. The 3 people's mouths were stuffed with strips of cloth so they could not speak. But when they looked at Sinosaurus and the other 2 people, their eyes were filled with anxiety. Grandfather, father, mother. Sinosaurus turned pale with fright. His eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. What are you doing? Hurry up and let my family go. Hand over the thing. Otherwise, each one of them will die in front of you. That feeling will be unforgettable for the rest of your life. The black-clothed man cruelly said. I don't even know what you're talking about. What can I give you? You remind him. The black-clothed man pointed at the shaman and said. The shaman arrogantly took a few steps forward. She fearfully glanced at Tang Zheng and arrogantly said, Sinosaurus, you have a magic weapon in your body. Hurry up and hand it over. Magic weapon. The 3 people were shocked. This shaman had actually discovered this before. It was really unexpected. Originally, when the shaman treated Sinosaurus, she had already discovered this. But with her cultivation, she was unable to summon that magic weapon. That magic weapon had already merged with Sinosaurus' flesh and blood. If she wanted to obtain the magic weapon, she had to wait for Sinosaurus to die. She had always been looking forward to Do Long's death, and in the end, she even instigated the villagers to kill them all, so that they could completely cut off all hope and let Do Long die a little faster, so that she could take the magic treasure for herself. Or she could wait for the family to leave and get rid of them in an unknown place. Then she could kill them and take the magic weapon. In short, she had a lot of plans. But she did not expect Tang Zheng to appear halfway and ruin her plans. She almost died in Tang Zheng's hands. Although she knew that by helping the black-clothed man, she would not have the chance to obtain the magic weapon. But she still helped the black-clothed man. Because, as long as she could strike Sinosaurus and the others, she would be very happy. Chapter 589. Seeing that the shaman had seen through the mystery, the 3 people's expressions changed slightly. These people really came for the mountain-shattering meteor hammer, but judging from their attire, they were not from the Sword Pavilion or the National Security Bureau. Tang Zheng suddenly had an idea and asked, Are you from the island nation? The black-clothed men were slightly startled. They could already hide their identities, but they were still seen through by the other party. This was unexpected. You are not ordinary villagers. The black-clothed man asked with a murderous look. Humph, the people of the island nation dare to come to Hua Xia and behave atrociously. If you don't change your character, then today you will not be able to return. Tang Zheng said resolutely. Since you don't know life from death, then there is no need to talk nonsense with you. Do it, kill their families first. The black-clothed man ordered, and 3 katanas quietly lit up in the night, stabbing towards Sinosaurus's family. The 3 people's mouths were stuffed with cloth, and their eyes were wide open in fear. They kept struggling, but they were powerless. How dare you, I will kill you. Sinosaurus roared furiously. With a flash of light in his hand, the mountain-shattering meteor hammer flew out of his hand and flew towards the black-clothed man who intended to commit murder. At the same time, the other black-clothed men swung their katanas and rushed towards Tang Zheng and the other 2. Kacha! With a crisp sound, the katana was smashed into pieces by the mountain-shattering meteor hammer. The attack of the mountain-shattering meteor hammer did not decrease and smashed into the black-clothed man's head. Like a watermelon falling from a high altitude, brain matter flew everywhere, blood spurted out, and the headless corpse fell to the ground with a thud. Sinosaurus rushed towards the black-clothed man like a tiger coming down the mountain. Tang Zheng and Marshall were even faster. Like two ghosts, they quietly rushed to the front of the black-clothed man and attacked like lightning. Two black-clothed men flew out and crashed into the wall. They immediately died, and blood spilled all over the ground. In one exchange, the black-clothed men lost 3 of their men. Immediately, cries of alarm sounded from all directions. Baka, cut them all into pieces. The remaining 10 or so black-clothed men rushed towards Tang Zheng and the other 2 like hungry wolves hunting for food. The 3 of them were obviously not afraid. Other than Sinosaurus, who was a little unfamiliar with his movements, Tang Zheng and Marshall were completely at ease. Most of these black-clothed men were Xiantian martial artists, but the highest was only a 5th-grade Xiantian martial artist. They were far from being a match for Tang Zheng. Since the other party was from an island nation, Tang Zheng did not show any mercy. He unleashed killing moves one after another, causing the black-clothed men to fall to the ground and die miserably. The courtyard was filled with the smell of blood, and the aura of death shrouded the courtyard, causing people to be terrified. The 3 people from the Dou clan were already stunned and unable to move. Even the shaman was scared silly. She originally thought that the black-clothed man was already a ruthless character, but now she understood that these 3 youngsters were even more ruthless. They showed a maturity and ruthlessness that did not match their age. The men in black were finally afraid. These people were not the small fries they had imagined. This time, they had kicked a steel plate. Quickly retreat. The leader screamed and retreated in panic, trying to escape, but how could Tang Zheng let him do as he wished? Like a shadow, he followed closely behind. The battle soul sword pierced out, aiming for the opponent's back. The opponent was a 5th-grade Xiantian martial artist. His strength was not weak. Feeling the biting cold killing intent behind him, he casually grabbed the stunned shaman and pushed her back. Pooh! The shaman crashed into Battle Soul and the sword tip pierced through her body. The shaman looked at the bleeding sword tip on her chest. Her eyes were about to explode. Her head tilted and her life was cut off. Tang Zheng did not have the slightest bit of mercy. Last time he had let her go, but who would have thought that she would not change? She deserved to die. After the battle soul pierced through the shaman's body, it did not slow down and caught up with the leader. The 2 of them were like candied haws, being strung together. The black-clothed man's eyes widened in despair as he let out an unwilling roar. He took out something from his bosom and threw it towards the sky. Bang! With an explosion, a strangely shaped firework bloomed in the sky. Damn it, this is a signal. Damn it, even when you are about to die, you still don't stop. Tang Zheng pulled out Battle's soul and the 2 corpses fell to the ground. The other black-clothed men were also wiped out by Marshall and Sinosaurus. Especially Sinosaurus, who was still a little unfamiliar with it at first, but later on, he gradually became proficient and crazily waved the mountain-shattering meteor hammer. Although his cultivation was not as good as the black-clothed men, he had the support of the mountain-shattering meteor hammer. In addition, because he hated the other party for threatening him with his family, his fighting strength was pushed to the peak. Many black-clothed men died under his mountain-shattering meteor hammer. The black-clothed men had been completely wiped out, but Sinosaurus still did not stop. He crazily waved the mountain-shattering meteor hammer, and in the end, he loudly shouted, "Kill, kill, kill, kill." His body was also dyed with the blood of his enemies, which was extremely terrifying. The Dou family finally woke up from their dream. Looking at the crazy Sinosaurus, Mother Dou was the first to uncontrollably cry. She threw herself at Sinosaurus and screamed, "Son, what's wrong with you? Don't scare me, woo. Be careful." Seeing that, Tang Zheng immediately grabbed Sinosaurus's arm. Otherwise, in the next second, Sinosaurus would accidentally hurt his mother. "Lao Er, wake up!" Tang Zheng roared loudly. It was like a huge bell, shaking people's eardrums to the point of pain. Sinosaurus was startled and stopped. The madness in his eyes decreased sharply and he gradually regained his clarity. When he saw his anxious and frightened family, he was overjoyed. He hugged them and cheered, "You guys are fine, that's great, that's great." 2 streams of hot tears flowed from his eyes. Who says men don't cry? That's because they haven't been hurt. Just now, he was really frightened and angry. Don't look at how Sinosaurus was usually rough and careless. His family was his lifeblood. If anyone dared to harm his family, he would fight them to the death. The family hugged each other and cried. They had never experienced such a terrifying thing. After surviving a disaster, they had mixed feelings. "Son, you guys killed someone. What should we do?" Mother Doe was at a loss. She suddenly said with a resolute expression, "You guys hurry up and run. When the police come, I'll take responsibility. Just say that I killed them." Old Man Doe and Doe Jiang nodded at the same time and said, "Yes, listen to your mother. You guys hurry up and leave. We'll take care of this matter." Sinosaurus resolutely said, "I dare to take responsibility for my actions. How can I, Sinosaurus, be a coward? You guys are still young. You still have a long life ahead of you. How can you be ruined like this?" The Doe family said with unquestionable hearts. "Don't worry. I'll take care of this matter. No one will be arrested." Tang Zheng interrupted their worries and said, "You." Old Man Doe and the others clearly didn't believe him, but someone died, and it's not just one. You guys can relax. These are all people from an island nation. Back then, they invaded our country and now they're here to cause trouble. They deserve to die. Tang Zheng comforted. "Second brother, send them back to their homes in the city. Don't come back here. I'll stay here to take care of this matter." "Can I really?" Sinosaurus's heart was apprehensive. Tang Zheng patted his shoulder and said, "Don't worry. I'll take care of everything." Sinosaurus thought about how Tang Zheng knew the National Security Bureau and couldn't help but believe him. Moreover, after experiencing such a battle, if the Doe family continued to stay, it would definitely leave a psychological shadow. The Doe family simply packed up and left the village in the middle of the night. In the middle of the night, Tang Zheng and Marshall sat at the entrance of the courtyard. Behind them was a messy battlefield with many corpses lying everywhere. Dong dong dong. Hurried footsteps sounded out. A group of black-clothed men completely blended into the night as they quickly approached the quiet courtyard. A murderous aura assaulted their faces. Tang Zheng and Marshall were calm and collected. They squinted their eyes and closed their eyes to rest. This time, the other party's background is not small. Marshall calmly said. "Scared?" I still don't know the word scared." Marshall coldly said. "Then let's start a massacre. The people of the island nation have never given up and have always coveted our treasures. This time, they must have come for the treasures. A small country actually dares to covet our treasures. They deserve to die." Tang Zheng said with a murderous look. "Although the treasure has nothing to do with me, I am still a little interested in killing the devil." Marshall said. "I didn't expect you to be so warm-hearted. You have a good view of the overall situation." Tang Zheng joked. Marshall coldly snorted, declining to comment. The sound of footsteps arrived in the blink of an eye. Not long later, the black-clothed men surrounded the courtyard. Smelling the faint smell of blood in the air, and then looking at the 2 people sitting at the entrance, the black-clothed men all stopped in their tracks. An old man with a white beard walked out. He was not wearing a mask, and between his brows was a cold killing intent. He was short, but his aura was extremely strong. The other tall black-clothed men were like 3-year-old children in front of him. Tang Zheng's pupils suddenly constricted. He stared at the old man and softly spat out 2 words, "Grand Master." This old man was actually a Grand Master martial artist. Although Tang Zheng could not see his exact cultivation level, but judging from the other party's aura, he definitely would not be wrong. More than one Grand Master had lost to Tang Zheng, so he was not afraid of the Grand Master. He casually glanced at the other party and said, "Is everyone here? Who are you? Where are my people?" The old man also knew Huaxia, so he asked without any trace of politeness. "I am from Huaxia. As for your people, yes, they are lying in the courtyard. They are lonely on the road to the Yellow Springs, waiting for you to accompany them." Tang Zheng said. "Baka, you dare to go against us? Hee, I've already killed them. Do you think I wouldn't dare?" Tang Zheng asked in ridicule. "It seems that you have obtained the magic treasure. That's why you are so unbridled. This time, not only do I want your lives, I also want the magic treasure," the old man said. "Then come and get it." Tang Zheng raised the War Soul sword that had been defeated on his leg. "Let's see if you have the ability." "Kill!" The old man roared and took the lead to rush out. However, just as he took a step forward, his figure disappeared. Interesting. Tang Zheng narrowed his eyes and stared at the vast night sky. He could not find any trace of the old man. Suddenly, a katana appeared behind Tang Zheng without any warning and pierced towards his back. Clang! Tang Zheng did not move. Behind him, intense sparks lit up. The other party's sneak attack had failed. Chapter 590. What kind of kung fu is this? Tang Zheng asked curiously. Ninjutsu. An old voice sounded. The voice was erratic, making people unable to determine where it came from. Ninjutsu? Tang Zheng muttered in his heart, what was the difference between this and illusion? In fact, ninjutsu and illusion were really inextricably linked. In ancient times, the island nation was just a vassal state of Huaxia, a small place, and the whole country worshipped Huaxia, and they even sent people across the ocean to Huaxia to learn. At that time, the cultivators of Huaxia were popular, and the island nation, as a barbarian land, was shocked by the cultivation technique, so they wanted to learn this immortal technique. However, most of the people of the island nation were uncivilized, slow in thinking, and unable to understand the profound meaning of cultivation. Many people's wisdom was exhausted, and they only learned a little. Later, the cultivators of Huaxia were expelled to Tianweishan, and the island nation couldn't learn even if they wanted to. Later, Kung Fu was carried forward, so the island nation also focused on learning Kung Fu, forming the popular and everlasting Bushido in the island nation today. As for some of the techniques learned in the past, they were also integrated into Bushido, forming a new sect called Ninjutsu, and the people who practiced ninjutsu were called ninjas. Ninjutsu was more mysterious than ordinary Bushido. Not everyone could learn it, but it was secretly passed down from generation to generation. After hundreds of years of inheritance, ninjutsu was much more advanced than before, and some of them were already considered kung fu. Therefore, the old man opposite him was half a step into the threshold of a cultivator, but his strength couldn't only be judged by the level of a cultivator. In short, this person was definitely the most troublesome person from the island nation that Tang Zheng had ever encountered. These ninjas got the information that there was a magic weapon in the northeast of Huaxia, so they disguised themselves and sneaked into Huaxia, just to take the magic weapon for themselves. Although their ninjutsu could be considered as spells, they didn't have any magical weapons after all. Their power was greatly reduced, and it was difficult for them to be elegant. If he had a treasure that complemented his ninjutsu would definitely reach a higher level. However, the magical equipment had already been taken by Tang Zheng and Sinosaurus, and they were one step too late. You're lucky to be able to die under ninjutsu. Give me your life. The old man roared, and the katana silently appeared in front of Tang Zheng's chest. Moreover, he chopped down 3 times in a row, continuously, and could not be underestimated. Tang Zheng frowned and said, "Since you like to play hide-and-seek, I'll play with you." As soon as he finished speaking, the katana struck empty air. Tang Zheng's figure was nowhere to be seen. He and the old man had disappeared without a trace. Huh? The other black-clothed men couldn't help but exclaim as they shook their heads in disbelief. Impossible, this is a high-level ninjutsu, how can he know it? Is this a high-level ninjutsu? Then it seems that your ninjutsu is only a so-so. Tang Zheng's disdainful voice rang out. Audacious, you dare to insult ninjutsu. The black-clothed men angrily shouted, wishing that they could immediately pull out their swords and cut Tang Zheng into 1,000 pieces. However, they couldn't find any trace of Tang Zheng. It's just an insignificant skill. Tang Zheng coldly said. Illusions were not very profound techniques for cultivators, but the opponent's ninjutsu was clearly born out of illusions. It only had the appearance, but it didn't have the essence. Although ordinary people couldn't see the two of them, when Tang Zheng revolved his chi, his perception greatly increased, and he finally found a clue. This ninjutsu had obvious mana fluctuations. Ordinary people and martial artists couldn't sense it, but Tang Zheng could clearly feel it. With a thought, he determined the old man's position. With a wave of his hand, the War Soul sword pierced out. Voila! The air spread out in all directions, leaving behind only the power of the sword. When the old man saw that Tang Zheng had also become invisible, he didn't panic. Instead, he was wild with joy. He subconsciously thought that this was the effect of the mysterious treasure, so he couldn't wait to take the treasure for himself. At that time, his ninjutsu would definitely reach a higher level, and he might even be promoted to the top of the island nation's ninja master. As the sword and blade clashed, the air exploded with bright sparks, but the others still couldn't see the two figures. They could only hear the sound of fighting rising and falling. In the blink of an eye, the two had already exchanged more than 10 moves. Although Tang Zheng's cultivation was only at the 7th level of Anidia, with the support of the War Soul sword, his fighting strength soared. He didn't even need the 4 symbols venerables to contend against a master. In fact, when fighting with this old man, Tang Zheng had taken advantage of him. This was because the other party had deliberately used ninjutsu and not martial arts, giving Tang Zheng an opportunity to take advantage of. Tang Zheng's comprehension and understanding of magic far surpassed his opponents, so wanting to use ninjutsu to defeat Tang Zheng was purely a fantasy. The battle between the two sides became more and more intense. Occasionally, there would be sounds of collisions in the air, and occasionally, blood would spurt out. Everyone held their breaths with rapt attention as they stared fixedly at the blood, and all of them guessed exactly who was injured. The atmosphere of the battlefield became more and more intense. It was so oppressive that it made it hard for people to breathe. Many people's hearts were in their throats. She knew how powerful Tang Zheng was, but this opponent was not someone who was easy to deal with. Wu knew that she was not a match for the old man, so who would be the victor? The old man's aura gradually became chaotic. He gradually discovered some clues. Every time he thought that his attacks were flawless, they would be seen through by Tang Zheng. It was as if Tang Zheng could see through his whereabouts. Tang Zheng's attacks also became sharper and sharper, causing him to be unable to defend against them. He was surrounded by danger, and a few wounds had already appeared on his body, causing blood to flow out. However, he was unable to harm Tang Zheng in the slightest. This kind of situation was unprecedented, causing him to feel incomparably depressed and terrified. Your ninjutsu has already lost its effect. Hurry up and show yourself. Tang Zheng did not play hide and seek with the other party anymore. With a loud shout, he thrusted out his sword, his aura firmly locking onto the old man. Yes, even though the old man had concealed his figure, he was still firmly locked onto by Tang Zheng's aura. No matter how he moved, that trace of aura never left his body. This feeling was extremely mysterious, causing the old man's expression to change greatly. Suddenly, pa pa pa. The air around the old man exploded violently like firecrackers. The old man's figure suddenly stopped and gradually revealed itself. The old man was shocked. He looked around and screamed, "What's going on? How could this be?" The other black-clothed men also looked as if they had seen a ghost. Ninjutsu was a high-level secret technique in their eyes. How could it fail? The corner of Tang Zheng's mouth raised, and he laughed proudly. I already told you, ninjutsu is just an insignificant skill. Although Tang Zheng did not know the origin of ninjutsu, he could tell that there were many flaws in ninjutsu. The mana fluctuations were too obvious, and it was easy for an expert like Tang Zheng to find clues. Therefore, the old man tried his best to use ninjutsu, but in Tang Zheng's eyes, he was like a transparent person, with nowhere to hide. With the ninjutsu failing, the old man panicked and exclaimed, "You are definitely not a cultivator who has just become a cultivator, but a cultivator who has been cultivating for a long time. Who exactly are you?" If it was in the past, if the old man met a real cultivator, he would be happy. Because, in his whole life, he hoped to improve his ninjutsu to the next level, but he knew that ninjutsu had reached the end, unless there was a new opportunity, such as becoming a cultivator. The old man was very clear about the origin of ninjutsu. Although he did not admit it verbally, he knew that ninjutsu had a lot of room for improvement after incorporating the essence of magic. But the key point was that Tang Zheng's strength was too strong, and he had no way to defeat him. Instead, his opponent took advantage of every opportunity, making his hope like flowers in a mirror and the moon in the water. Hearing the other party's question, Tang Zheng smiled and did not say a word. War Spirit slashed out, and the old man hurriedly responded. Suddenly, War Spirit flashed, and a dark sword light wrapped around the katana. With a kacha sound, the katana broke into two, and War Spirit slashed at the old man's neck. The old man's neck was cold, and he staggered back. Finally, he fell to the ground and luckily escaped the danger of being beheaded. War Spirit flew past his scalp, cutting off a few strands of hair and quietly falling down, causing the old man's back to break out in cold sweat. Consider yourself lucky, but this time you may not be able to escape. Tang Zheng said coldly, and was about to attack again, but heard heavy footsteps approaching from afar, and shouted, "Tang Zheng, stay your sword." Tang Zheng's movements came to an abrupt stop, and he turned his head to look in the direction of the person. "Director Su, you want to save him?" Tang Zheng asked curiously. He was not surprised by Su Yingtian's arrival, as he had expected. Of course, the case he did this time must be dealt with by the National Security Bureau, so that he would not get into trouble. Moreover, he believed that the fireworks signal from the island nation people must have alarmed the nearby National Security Bureau. Su Yingtian had been painstakingly searching for the island nation people, so how could he let go of this great opportunity? Tang Zheng had calculated all of this, but he did not calculate Su Yingtian's attitude and reaction. "Don't misunderstand, I'm not saving him. Do you know who this person is?" Su Yingtian asked. "I don't care who he is. If he dares to come to Huaxia and show off his strength, then he deserves to die," Tang Zheng said without any trace of politeness. You have this kind of awareness, which is worthy of praise, but there are some things that we can pursue for greater benefits. Wouldn't it be too easy for him to just kill him?" Su Yingtian said with a smile, like an old fox. Tang Zheng seemed to be deep in thought, and said, "Oh, then tell me who he is first." "This person is the island nation's Bushido, but this is not the most exciting part. He has another identity, he is the island nation's emperor's younger brother." The emperor's younger brother, which is also the royal family. Tang Zheng's eyes widened. Nowadays, pictures of the island nation's royal princesses are often circulated on the internet. As for the other members of the royal family, they are quite mysterious, and ordinary people do not know. This person is actually the emperor's younger brother, then his identity is really not ordinary. You killed the emperor's younger brother. In less than 3 days, then you will really be famous. Su Yingtian joked. It's just a small country, what's so great about the royal family? Tang Zheng curled his lips, obviously he did not like these nobles and did not have any respect for them. Moreover, didn't he save a Swedish princess from Europe? Chapter 591. Su Yingtian rolled his eyes. Ordinary people were in awe of nobles, but a freak like Tang Zheng didn't even put the royal family in his eyes. Suing Tian couldn't help feeling fortunate that his strategy back then was wise. He did not use his authority to suppress the other party, but chose to cooperate instead. Xing Feng was too self-righteous, which was why he and Tang Zheng were like fire and water. When the other people from the island nation heard Tang Zheng's words, they all shouted, "Baka!" The old man's face turned ashen as he roared, "Audacious! How dare you be rude to the royal family!" Tang Zheng raised his sword and pierced it towards the old man, causing the latter to retreat in a panic. But with a turn of the sword, he stopped his attack. Tang Zheng smiled with his eyes narrowed as he looked at the old man and asked, "Do you still think that I don't dare to kill you?" "You." The old man's face turned red as he was left speechless. Tang Zheng ignored the old man and turned to Suing Tian. "If you don't kill him, how are you going to deal with him?" "Ha, as a member of the royal family of an island nation, he must know a lot of information. This is a big fish, and it's not easy to catch such a big fish. You've just joined the National Security Bureau, and you've already made such a great contribution. Congratulations." Suing Tian chuckled. Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and saw through the old man's thoughts. Suing Tian took the initiative to give the credit to Tang Zheng, which meant that he wanted to add 10 points to the relationship between Tang Zheng and the National Security Bureau. Regarding this, Tang Zheng did not have any objections. "This old man is stubborn. Are you sure you can pry open his mouth?" Tang Zheng asked in a solemn voice. Suing Tian confidently smiled. "You have to believe that the National Security Bureau has been established for so many years. It's not for nothing." Tang Zheng thought for a long time and said, "Since you've come forward, I'll give you face. However, it's too annoying to see so many people strutting around Huaxia." Before he finished speaking, Tang Zheng attacked. Like a bolt of lightning, he shuttled through the island nation people. Poof! Poof! Conferring a marquee at the sight of blood. Blood spurted out from their necks like small fountains. Island nation people covered their necks and looked at each other in disbelief. Their eyes were filled with deep despair. Bang bang bang, except for the old man, all the people from the island nation fell to the ground and stopped breathing. It was as if Tang Zheng had never left his original position. Even the blade of the War Soul sword did not have the slightest trace of blood. This series of attacks was too incisive, dazzling and overwhelming. When the old man wanted to save him, he found that it was already too late. His eyes were bloodshot as he roared, "I will kill you." Tang Zheng hooked his finger at the old man and said, "Welcome, but next time you won't be so lucky. Who do you think will die in whose hands?" The old man suddenly froze and was speechless. After fighting with Tang Zheng for so long, he had clearly realized the gap between them. If he wanted to kill Tang Zheng, it would be harder than ascending to the heavens. However, if Tang Zheng wanted to get rid of him, it would not take much effort. He was completely unable to accept such an outcome. His head drooped as if he had lost his parents. However, the flames that were about to spurt out of his eyes showed his inner feelings. Suing Tian did not stop Tang Zheng from killing. The lives of some shrimp soldiers and crab generals were insignificant to him. Moreover, from Tang Zheng's decisive killing, he also had a new understanding of Tang Zheng. He echoed, "Huaxia is indeed no longer the sick man of East Asia that can be bullied. Since they dare to come, then of course we will make them pay the price in blood." The old man fiercely glared at Suing Tian, but he remained indifferent as if he did not see it. However, why would these people come to this remote village? Suing Tian's eyes turned as he suspiciously muttered to himself. Tang Zheng's heart trembled. Could it be that he had found out about the mountain-shattering meteor hammer? Sinosaurus's strength was still weak, so he had to bide his time to prevent others from coveting it. In the future, when his cultivation was high enough, it would not be too late to announce it to the public. Tang Zheng did not bat an eyelid as he calmly said, "Who knows? The Japanese have never needed a specific reason to do things. They only do it on a whim." Nonsense. Our people came to this village because they found traces of a magic treasure and not because of a whim. The old man refuted. Tang Zheng's gaze turned cold. Would this old thing die if he spoke less? Fortunately, the advanced troops of the island nation had all died, so the old man did not know about the mountain-shattering meteor hammer. Magic treasure? Su Yingtian's heart moved. You really came for the magic treasure. The old man heard this and jokingly said, it seems that you know even less than us. Ha, then don't think that you can get a word out of me. Ha, is that so? Then we'll see. Su Yingtian said unconcernedly. Director Su, we will take our leave first. We will have to trouble you to clean up this mess. Tang Zheng pointed to the courtyard and said. Don't worry. Isn't that what the National Security Bureau does? Su Yingtian said casually. Tang Zheng and Wu left the village that night and met up with the Dou clan. They told them that the matter had been resolved and that they did not need to worry. Although the Dou clan was skeptical, they did not have a better way. Moreover, they did not see the police coming to arrest them, so they gradually believed it. However, when Tang Zheng warned them not to return to the village, they agreed without hesitation. They no longer had any lingering feelings for that village. However, the impact of this matter on the family was not small. After many days, they gradually forgot about this nightmare. Since school had already started, Tang Zheng, Sinosaurus, and Wu took a flight to the capital the next day. Sinosaurus's return made the atmosphere in room 502 lively again. They had a good meal together and were very happy. Fortunately, Sinosaurus's mental endurance was not bad. He did not show too much abnormality and did not arouse the suspicion of others. At night, Tang Zheng left Wu Wu and quietly sneaked into the underground of the Imperial City. Before the new year, an earthquake occurred in the Imperial City, which affected the nerves of all parties. During that time, the Imperial Palace was loose on the outside and tight on the inside. However, there was no movement and no useful information was found, so all the spies were withdrawn. This made it convenient for Tang Zheng to enter the underground of the Imperial City and meet with the five-clawed golden dragon. During the winter vacation, he had accumulated too many questions to ask the five-clawed golden dragon. When he walked in the direction of the five-clawed golden dragon, the dragon chi in his body surged. Back then, in the Southern Sea Dragon Palace, the dragon chi in his body was emitted. The powerful dragon might cause many sea demons to crawl on the ground, not daring to move at all. That kind of domineering aura made Tang Zheng feel as if he had fallen into a dream. For the first time in his life, he experienced the power of dragon chi. At first, the dragon chi in his body was accumulated after absorbing the five-clawed golden dragon's chi and consuming the dragon yuan pill. However, when his dragon god art broke through to the second stage, a lifelike two-clawed golden dragon appeared in his mind, and a golden dragon head was branded on his forehead. It was full of dragon might, and dragon chi gradually formed in his body. Previously, his dragon chi would not increase on its own, but ever since he cultivated to the second level of the dragon god technique, his dragon chi gradually increased. This was something he had never expected. The dragon god technique actually had such a divine power. However, the dragon chi had always been deliberately suppressed by him, so others could not sense it. Otherwise, when ordinary people faced this dragon chi, they would really feel suffocated like Mount Tai. At this moment, the dragon chi was surging. This unprecedented change caused Tang Zheng to involuntarily frown. When he walked to the door, he found that the five-clawed golden dragon was staring at him with wide eyes. Your dragon god technique has actually been cultivated to the second level. The five-clawed golden dragon impatiently spoke first. Tang Zheng looked straight in front of the five-clawed golden dragon, and the dragon chi in his body involuntarily gushed out. In an instant, his aura suddenly changed. Although his body was countless times smaller than the five-clawed golden dragon, at this moment, his aura was like a rainbow, giving people an illusion. It was as if the gap between him and the five-clawed golden dragon wasn't that big. That invisible aura made up for the gap between the two of them. Yes, the dragon god technique has reached the second level. A double-clawed golden dragon appeared in my mind, and there is a dragon head imprint in the center of my forehead. Tang Zheng activated his power, and the double-clawed golden dragon in his mind began to churn, as if it was riding the clouds in the sky. His forehead emitted a golden light, and the golden dragon imprint shone brightly. Dragon Seal. The five-clawed golden dragon cried out in alarm. His eyes were wide open like two large lanterns. How did you manage to cultivate the dragon seal? Tang Zheng looked suspiciously at the five-clawed golden dragon's huge reaction. The five-clawed golden dragon had always been calm, but why did it look like it had seen a ghost at this moment? There must be a demon behind this abnormality. Dragon Seal. Is my imprint called Dragon Seal? Tang Zheng touched his forehead, but he didn't feel the slightest bit of difference. This is the Dragon Seal, the symbol of our dragon clan. Look at me. The five-clawed golden dragon said excitedly. Suddenly, a golden light flashed, and a mark appeared in the center of its forehead. A huge dragon head impressively appeared in front of its eyes. It was extremely powerful, many times more powerful than Tang Zheng's dragon seal. This was the first time Tang Zheng saw the five-clawed golden dragon's dragon seal. He curiously opened his eyes wide. When the dragon seal appeared, the dragon's might multiplied, making people feel like they were bowing down to it. Mighty. Tang Zheng praised from the bottom of his heart. The five-clawed golden dragon ignored his praise and asked seriously, "Tell me, how did you, a human, manage to cultivate the dragon seal?" Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and asked, "Can't humans cultivate the dragon seal?" Of course not, this is the unique symbol of the dragon clan. You are not a dragon clan, so how can you cultivate the dragon seal? The five-clawed golden dragon said grumpily. Tang Zheng shrugged and said, "You ask me, how would I know? I still want you to give me an answer." No, there must be a problem somewhere. Even if you are a celestial, I have never heard of a celestial being able to cultivate the dragon seal. The five-clawed golden dragon shook its head, its big eyes were filled with disbelief. Tell me, when did your dragon seal appear? The five-clawed golden dragon didn't give up and asked. When? Tang Zheng scratched his head and suddenly remembered, it was in the desert, a few days before the new year. Why did you suddenly break through at that time? The dragon god arts was a cultivation method that was difficult at first, but then easy. Originally, he was able to cultivate the first layer successfully. The five-clawed golden dragon didn't expect him to break through to the second layer so quickly. The Tree of Life once again saw the light of day. I absorbed the Tree of Life's spiritual qi. Chapter 592. Seeing such a big reaction from the five-clawed golden dragon, Tang Zheng looked at it in amazement. The five-clawed golden dragon had always been calm in the face of changes. For a creature that had lived for who knows how many years, there were very few things that could surprise it. Are you sure it's the Tree of Life? The five-clawed golden dragon asked in bewilderment. Tang Zheng nodded, it's absolutely true. The five-clawed golden dragon took a deep breath and said, no wonder you can cultivate the dragon mark, it's all because of the Tree of Life. When the Tree of Life is born, the aura it emits is the most original energy between heaven and earth. It has the ability to seize the heavens and earth and is very magical. You can only create a miracle by absorbing this aura and cultivate the dragon mark. Tang Zheng suddenly realized that he was too lucky. No wonder I feel that the aura between heaven and earth is a lot richer. It turns out that the Tree of Life has reappeared in the world. How did you find the Tree of Life? The five-clawed golden dragon asked curiously. Tang Zheng did not hide anything and told it about falling into the cave and encountering the Tree of Life. The five-clawed golden dragon was amazed and said, your luck is really too good. The Tree of Life has disappeared for so many years and it was actually discovered by you. Is this the will of the heavens for the Tree of Life to reappear in the world? Whether it's the will of the heavens or not, I just want to know what's so special about this dragon mark. Tang Zheng asked. Degrees Celsius is almost equal to the five-clawed golden dragon said seriously, the dragon mark is the symbol of the dragon clan. It is the source of the dragon clan's power and contains many secrets of the dragon clan. Even I may not be able to clearly explain the magic of the dragon mark. You can't even explain it clearly? Tang Zheng was stunned. You are from the dragon clan. You can't even figure out the matters of your own clan. The five-clawed golden dragon rolled its eyes. Can you humans figure out all the problems of your own body? Tang Zheng was speechless. Hee, you have the dragon mark. Are you still a human? This is a question. The five-clawed golden dragon said shockingly. Not a human. Tang Zheng choked, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Back then, Tian Chanzi had also said that he was not a human. Now, the five-clawed golden dragon had said the same thing, which made him doubt his own life. Now that you have the dragon mark, you are considered a member of the dragon clan. Tell me, are you still human? F***ck, then what have I become? Tang Zheng was exasperated. Forget it, I've been a human for more than 20 years, I still prefer to be a human. The dragon clan is incomparably noble. It's your honor to be part of the dragon clan. The five-clawed golden dragon said snappily. Tang Zheng hurriedly waved his hand and said, let's not dwell on this issue. Since you can't explain clearly about the dragon seal, let's change the topic. You should know about the Langya Pavilion, right? Langya Pavilion? The five-clawed golden dragon looked at him suspiciously. It seems that you have learned a lot from the trip to the South Sea Dragon Palace. This is all thanks to you. Tell me about the Langya Pavilion. The Langya Pavilion is an important place of the Dragon Clan. If it were anyone else, I would definitely not tell them. However, you are already a member of the Dragon Clan, so you are qualified to know these things. The Langya Pavilion contains the cultivation methods collected by the Dragon Clan, as well as all kinds of rare treasures. It's a treasure trove that many people covet, but these people can only look at it and sigh. They can't even find the Langya Pavilion, let alone open it. Because, unless it is a member of the Dragon Clan, no one can open the Langya Pavilion. The five-clawed golden dragon was full of confidence, and his words were filled with pride from the bottom of his heart. Then, can't I also open the Langya Pavilion? Tang Zheng was secretly delighted. The dragon mark had brought him a lot of benefits. Of course you can. Then where is the Langya Pavilion? The five-clawed golden dragon smiled mysteriously, and the dragon mark on his forehead lit up. Tang Zheng was confused. What do you mean? Stupid. The Langya Pavilion is in the dragon mark and is connected to every member of the dragon clan. So, non-members of the dragon clan have no way to find it, let alone open it. The five-clawed golden dragon reprimanded. Tang Zheng was suddenly enlightened. In the dragon mark. He subconsciously touched his forehead and said happily, then how can I open the Langya Pavilion? The five-clawed golden dragon did not answer. Instead, he asked, why do you want to go to the Langya Pavilion? To find a cultivation method. Tang Zheng told the truth. The cultivation method you practice is not weak. Are you still looking for other cultivation methods? Don't bite off more than you can chew. This is a famous saying. The five-clawed golden dragon advised. It is not for me, but for others, for the people around me. My cultivation method may not be suitable for them, so I want to find some suitable cultivation methods for them. Tang Zheng explained. The five-clawed golden dragon suddenly understood and said, many people in the world covet the treasures in the Langya Pavilion, but they have never succeeded. Now, you are actually giving these treasures to others. The five-clawed golden dragon was obviously unhappy. After all, the cultivation methods in the Langya Pavilion were collected by the Dragon Clan. Tang Zheng was not frightened by the five-clawed golden dragon's attitude. He asked, can't I? Of course you can. After all, you are already part of the Dragon Clan. But the Dragon Clan also has a rule that high-level cultivation methods cannot be passed to outsiders. Sigh, in fact, I don't need to worry about this because you have only cultivated to the second level of the Dragon God technique. It is impossible for you to obtain a powerful cultivation method. What do you mean? do you think that any dragon clan member can enter the Langya Pavilion and obtain a high-level cultivation method? You may not think too simply of the Langya Pavilion, and the dragon clan is too stupid. The five-clawed golden dragon jokingly said. Tang Zheng was confused and asked, "What do you mean?" "Let me tell you, there are a total of 18 floors in the Langya Pavilion. Each floor requires a corresponding strength to go up and enjoy the corresponding treasures. Otherwise, no matter how much effort you put in, it will be in vain. There is such a strange rule." Tang Zheng could not help but feel a little depressed. "Then which floor can I go to now?" "The second floor." Tang Zheng's expression darkened as he said disappointedly, "It's only the second floor. Isn't that too little?" "It's already quite a lot. If it wasn't for the fact that you have cultivated to the second level of the Dragon God technique, you would only be able to wander around the first floor of the Langya Pavilion." The five-clawed golden dragon said disapprovingly. However, there was still a gap between this and Tang Zheng's expectations. "What are the powerful cultivation methods on the first and second floor?" Looking at your disdainful look, do you think that the first and second floor are very low-level cultivation methods? The five-clawed golden dragon asked disdainfully. "Isn't that so?" "Of course not. How could the dragon clan collect low-level cultivation methods? That would be an insult to the dragon clan's intelligence." Tang Zheng was overjoyed. It was good that it was not a low-level cultivation method. Otherwise, if the people around him were to cultivate low-level cultivation methods, he might as well not cultivate at all. Of course, this was because Tang Zheng had the confidence to be called a tycoon. Most people would already be satisfied if they had a low-end cultivation method to cultivate. Why would they still be picky? Then how do I get to the Langya Pavilion? Tang Zheng no longer entangled himself with the question of cultivation methods and asked. "I will teach you a set of methods. Naturally, you will be able to communicate with the Langya Pavilion." A golden light flashed and shot into Tang Zheng's brain. A set of methods appeared in Tang Zheng's mind. According to the method, Tang Zheng began to circulate his true qi. The dragon mark on his forehead shone brightly and emitted rays of golden light. The double-clawed golden dragon in his mind also began to churn. The dragon qi vibrated and spread in all directions, filling the entire stone room. The air fluctuated and Tang Zheng felt his body lighten. The scene in front of him changed and an antique building appeared. An ancient plaque hung in front of the building. The words, "Langya Pavilion," were written in ancient seal script. Langya Pavilion. Tang Zheng stared at the building and raised his head to look. There were indeed 18 floors, and each floor was richly ornamented. It was simply like a work of art. The door opened. Tang Zheng walked up the stairs and crossed the threshold. Suddenly, his eyes widened. 3 rows of bookshelves occupied the entire space. Each bookshelf was filled with ancient books. Looking up, there was a dazzling array of dazzling things. It made one unable to choose. Tang Zheng looked at a wooden plaque next to the bookshelf. There were small tadpole-like words carved on it. It introduced the situation of the first floor. This floor was full of cultivation methods. However, they were not cultivation methods. Instead, they were martial arts techniques. There were many extraordinary martial arts techniques in the world. Tang Zheng was not a martial artist. Therefore, these martial arts techniques were of little value to him. There was no need to spend time on them. He immediately stepped up the stairs and walked to the second floor. The second floor also had 3 rows of bookshelves. They were filled with various cultivation methods. The wooden plaque next to them introduced them as cultivation methods. Tang Zheng's eyes lit up. "I finally found you." The cultivation methods were as vast as the sea of smoke. Of course, he could not blindly rush up and look for them. Fortunately, these cultivation methods were organized according to category. He did not have to be at a loss. A cultivation method suitable for women. Tang Zheng's mind immediately came up with this idea. There were many women around him, but there were not many cultivation methods for women. It was a pity. He immediately rushed to a row of bookshelves and browsed from top to bottom. Finally, he stopped at the cultivation method at the top of the bookshelf. There were many cultivation methods at the bottom of this row of bookshelves. Only the top row only had one cultivation method. Could it be that the one at the top is the best? He was not a rookie. He had cultivated the ancient Clear Heaven Scroll and the Dragon God technique. He had a certain ability to distinguish cultivation methods. When he took the cultivation method at the top, he roughly glanced at it and immediately made a judgment. This was indeed a powerful cultivation method. Although it was not as good as the Dragon God technique and the ancient Clear Heaven Scroll, it was definitely a good cultivation method for ordinary cultivators. Moreover, this cultivation method was easy to learn. From simple to difficult, it could stimulate the enthusiasm and mood of the cultivator. This is it. Tang Zheng did not hesitate to put the cultivation method into his sumaru pouch. When the cultivation method entered the sumaru pouch, a cultivation method immediately appeared at the top of the bookshelf. It was exactly the same as the one he took. How mysterious. After I took it away, an identical book immediately appeared. It's equivalent to me just copying it. This Langia Pavilion is truly mysterious and strange. Tang Zheng clicked his tongue in admiration. Following the same pattern, he put the cultivation method at the top of the other two rows of bookshelves into his sumaru pouch. They were cultivation methods suitable for men and demon beasts. The dragon race enslaved tens of thousands of demon beasts. Of course, they would collect their cultivation methods. Tang Zheng now had 3 demon beasts under him. They were Xiaobai, Gui Qiansui, and Thundercloud Beast. He wanted to see if this cultivation method could help them. Achieving his goal, Tang Zheng was overjoyed. His eyes inadvertently swept to the stairs leading to the 3rd floor. His heart moved. What is on the 3rd floor? Chapter 593. Staring at the stairs leading to the 3rd floor, Tang Zheng struggled with his thoughts. In the end, he gritted his teeth and said, "The 5-clawed golden dragon said that I can only reach the 2nd floor. Will there be another miracle this time?" He lifted his foot and stepped on the stairs. Boom! As soon as his feet landed on the stairs, a huge repulsive force hit his body from the stairs. His face suddenly changed, and he hurriedly activated his genuine qi to resist the force. He held on for a minute, but his other foot could not reach the 2nd step. With a loud bang, he flew backward. The scene in front of him changed. The Langia Pavilion disappeared, and he returned to the underground of the imperial city. His face was pale, and his legs could not stop trembling. Miracles did not always happen. This time, the 5-clawed golden dragon was right. He could not set foot on the 3rd floor with his cultivation. I don't believe it. I want to try again. He was not willing to give up and quickly activated his technique again. After a while, he was shocked and could not help but exclaim, "Hey, why is there no reaction? Why can't I reach the Langia Pavilion?" Do you think you can go to the Langia Pavilion as you please?" The 5-clawed golden dragon's voice rang in his ears. Tang Zheng was stunned and looked at it suspiciously. He asked, "What do you mean?" The 5-clawed golden dragon rolled its eyes and said, "The Langia Pavilion is an important place of the Dragon Clan. Members of the Dragon Clan only have one chance to enter the Langia Pavilion every month, and each time there is a time limit. You only have a quarter of an hour." Tang Zheng suddenly understood, but he was immediately suspicious. "I didn't have a quarter of an hour just now." The 5-clawed golden dragon laughed evilly, "Of course not. I'm afraid you didn't listen to my judgment and tried to set foot on the 3rd floor, right? How do you know?" Of course I know. You're really overestimating yourself. The Langia Pavilion was discovered by the ancestors of the Dragon Clan and was built into the Langia Pavilion. The rules were set by the ancestors. Do you think you can break the rules of the Langia Pavilion? You were repulsed by the Langia Pavilion and were forced to leave, so you can't enter this month. The 5-clawed golden dragon laughed gloatingly. So that's how it is. Could it be that no one is an exception to this rule? Tang Zheng asked, unwilling to give up. Of course not. No one can violate the rules of the dragon clan's ancestors. The five-clawed golden dragon said with certainty. Tang Zheng sighed inwardly. Since that was the case, he should not be restless in the future. Otherwise, it would not be worth it if he was kicked out of the Langya pavilion after so much difficulty. However, he silently made up his mind, I will never give up on cultivating the Dragon God technique in the future because the Dragon God technique is related to the Langya pavilion. I don't know what other treasures are upstairs, I must go upstairs. Seeing that Tang Zheng was deflated, the five-clawed golden dragon brazenly rejoiced for a while, and then said in a deep voice, since you have become a member of the Dragon Clan, then you will be able to cultivate the Dragon God's secret art much faster than before. The Dragon God's secret art is an exquisite cultivation method of the Dragon Clan. It will help you reach the spirit severing stage as soon as possible, and help me leave this place. Looking at his desperate mood, Tang Zheng couldn't help but say, I'm only at the 7th grade of fasting. I'm still thousands of miles away from the deification stage. That's not necessarily true. You have created miracles time and time again. I think the time for me to break out of this cage is not far away. The five-clawed golden dragon was full of confidence. How was your trip to the Southern Sea Dragon Palace? The harvest was not small. However, the surroundings of the Southern Sea Dragon Palace were not as desolate as you said. It was quite lively with many sea demons gathered. Even the Dragon Palace was occupied and became the lair of the sea demons. They dare to occupy the Dragon Palace. What a big bastard. If I see these sea demons, I will definitely tear them into pieces. The five-clawed golden dragon showed his might and said with a murderous aura. Although the Dragon Palace was abandoned by the Dragon Clan, with the pride of the Dragon Clan, they would not allow other sea demons to occupy their lair. Those sea demons have no chance to occupy the Dragon Palace because I have already destroyed it. Tang Zheng said. Destroyed? The five-clawed golden dragon's huge eyes widened as he stared at Tang Zheng. His dragon's aura erupted and enveloped Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng was not afraid and said casually, I took away the black stone of heaven and earth and the Dragon Palace collapsed. The five-clawed golden dragon's aura collapsed and he sighed faintly, yes, the black stone of heaven and earth is the cornerstone of the Dragon Palace. Without the black stone of heaven and earth, the Dragon Palace will naturally cease to exist. Obviously, when he told Tang Zheng about the Southern Sea Dragon Palace, he already knew that the Dragon Palace would cease to exist. It's just that the Dragon Palace left me a lot of memories. I will never see the Southern Sea Dragon Palace again. The five-clawed golden dragon was disappointed. Tang Zheng looked at him suspiciously. Did the sun rise from the west? He could not believe that he would show such emotions. Seeing that he was depressed, Tang Zheng did not continue to dwell on this issue and asked, how much do you know about the Ghost Realm? Ghost Realm? The five-clawed golden dragon suddenly paused and looked at Tang Zheng suspiciously, why are you asking about the Ghost Realm? I have a little conflict with the Ghost Realm. Tang Zheng said frankly. How did you provoke the Ghost Realm? It's a long story. I'm all ears. The five-clawed golden dragon was very interested. Tang Zheng hesitated for a moment and told him about the Ghost Realm. The five-clawed golden dragon suddenly realized, no wonder you would ask me about the Ghost Realm. It turns out that you have provoked such a big trouble. Is it a big trouble? Tang Zheng was skeptical. Of course it's a big trouble. The life-continuing pill that you refined broke the balance of the Ghost Realm. This is a change of fate. How can the Ghost Realm watch you do whatever you want? It's not that serious. Only a few people have their lives prolonged. It's just a drop in the ocean. Tang Zheng was in disbelief. The five-clawed golden dragon retorted, a drop in the ocean? You think too simply. What do you mean by a single spark can start a prairie fire? As long as you start the first, there will naturally be a second person. At that time, the Ghost Realm will be in chaos. The foundation of the ghost realm will be destroyed by you. How can they not be nervous? That's why I said that you have caused a big trouble. Tang Zheng scratched his head and was skeptical. Was it really that serious? Did the life-continuing pill have such a big effect? Moreover, when Tian Chanzi taught him how to refine the life-continuing pill, he didn't say that it would have such a big effect. Tang Zheng had always thought that the life-continuing pill was an ordinary pill in the immortal cultivation world, but now it seems that his judgment was wrong. Is the life-continuing pill very ordinary in the immortal cultivation world? Tang Zheng couldn't help but ask. Ordinary? The five-clawed golden dragon stared at him like he was looking at a fool. Do you really not know, or are you pretending not to know? Of course I really don't know. The life-continuing pill is one of the top 10 divine pills in the immortal cultivation world. Many people have only heard of its name, but have never seen its true appearance. One of the top 10 divine pills. Tang Zheng was in disbelief. He always thought that the life-continuing pill was a common product that could be mass-produced. How could it be so magical from the five-clawed golden dragon's mouth? Moreover, Tian Chanzi had never revealed this point. Of course, lifespan is very important to a cultivator. With the life-continuing pill, a person can extend their lifespan and cultivate to a higher level. This is something that every cultivator yearns for even in their dreams. But the life-continuing pill is too rare, and I heard that the refining process is very complicated. Even for an alchemy grandmaster, it is not an easy task. Moreover, the recipe for the life-continuing pill is a secret. Where would an ordinary person have the opportunity to know? F***ck. Tang Zheng felt that his brain wasn't enough. This was completely different from what he thought. Tian Chanzi had never revealed anything to him. Since the life-continuing pill was so magical, then how did Tian Chanzi know the recipe? Moreover, Tang Zheng had refined the life-continuing pill more than once, so it wasn't as complicated as what the five-clawed golden dragon said. Originally, when he was at the peak of the ordinary balance mountain, he succeeded in refining 3 life-continuing pills in one try. One must know that at that time, he was only at the 3rd grade body refining realm, so his control of qi and fire was not very high. If he could refine the life-continuing pill with this kind of cultivation, then was the life-continuing pill really as magical as what the five-clawed golden dragon said? In addition, how did Tian Chanzi know the recipe for the life-continuing pill? Didn't he always say that he was just an ordinary cultivator? His brain was a mess, and his eyes were filled with confusion. The five-clawed golden dragon looked at him with interest and said, since the life-continuing pill was passed down to you by Tian Chanzi, I'm afraid he isn't as simple as he seems on the surface. Hey, you were tricked by him. Nonsense. Tang Zheng suddenly raised his head and shouted. He had been with Tian Chanzi for a long time, and his grandfather's life was also bestowed by Tian Chanzi, which was why he was able to increase his lifespan by 10 years. Unknowingly, he had already treated Tian Chanzi as a relative. When he heard that Tian Chanzi had tricked him, his reaction was so extreme. Towards his anger, the five-clawed golden dragon turned a blind eye to it and said, my words are not lies. If you don't believe me, you can ask him yourself. Ask him. Tang Zheng hesitated. He understood Tian Chanzi's character. This old man was as stubborn as an ox. If he was unwilling to say something, no matter what, Tang Zheng would not be able to pry open his mouth. But if he didn't ask him, what else could he do? Tang Zheng was caught in a dilemma. It's really interesting. At that time, I didn't see too many clues. This old man hides deeply. The next time I see him, I'll have to ask him carefully. The five-clawed golden dragon said with a smile. Tang Zheng's face was uncertain. Suddenly, he took a deep breath and said, I believe in him. Even if he didn't tell me the truth, he must have his own reasons. I believe that one day he will tell me the truth. If Tian Chanzi heard this, he would definitely be comforted. But the five-clawed golden dragon disdainfully said, you are really stupid. Who knows how long it will take for him to tell you the truth? Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and fiercely glared at the other party. He said snappily, I'm willing. Humph, since you are willing, then I don't need to be the bad guy. But you must remember not to delay your cultivation. The five-clawed golden dragon warned. Let's not talk about the life-prolonging pill. Why don't you talk about the ghost realm? Tang Zheng asked, changing the topic. Do you know how many realms there are in this world? The five-clawed golden dragon threw out a strange question. How many realms? Tang Zheng was confused. How would I know? Chapter 594. 3,000 large worlds, 9,000 small worlds. Tang Zheng was truly shocked by this number. It turned out that there were so many worlds and he was just a drop in the ocean. Even the world he was in was insignificant. The five-clawed golden dragon was very satisfied with Tang Zheng's reaction and said, now you know how powerful it is. What is a large world and what is a small world? Tang Zheng pondered for a moment and asked. The five-clawed golden dragon pointed at his feet and said, a large world and a small world are divided according to power. This world used to be a large world, but now it has been downgraded to a small world. Why would this world be downgraded? Tang Zheng was slightly surprised. Because its power has weakened, it will naturally be downgraded. Strength weakened? Tang Zheng instantly thought of the expulsion of the cultivators. Without the cultivators in this world, the power of humans had indeed weakened a lot. It seems that you have already guessed it. You guessed right. The five-clawed golden dragon seemed to have seen through his thoughts. Then, when the cultivators return, will this world be upgraded to a large world? Of course. Who exactly made these rules? The five-clawed golden dragon pointed to the sky, the heavenly Tao. All of these rules are evolved from the heavenly Tao and cannot be interfered with by humans. Tang Zheng felt as if a bell had struck. This series of information had really subverted his worldview. What are the advantages of a large world over a small world? The five-clawed golden dragon smiled mysteriously. Of course there are advantages. A small world will disappear and be annihilated in the vast universe, but a large world's luck is excellent. It has the advantage of time and place and will not be annihilated. Annihilation. Tang Zheng's body tensed up. Then what about the inhabitants of this world? Of course they will be annihilated along with the small world, completely disappearing from the vast universe. The five-clawed golden dragon's tone was calm, but the message it conveyed made Tang Zheng feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. You mean that one day, this world will be annihilated and disappear? Unless it is upgraded to a large world? Tang Zheng asked dumbfounded. Smart. The five-clawed golden dragon praised. However, Tang Zheng was not happy at all. This disappearance was too shocking. He had never thought that this world would disappear. Although scientists had always said that every world would die, it was inferred that this world still had a lifespan of tens of millions of years. There was no need for humans to worry about it. However, after hearing this, Tang Zheng was not so optimistic. The operation of the heavenly axiom was clearly not something that could be explained by technology. In the beginning, this world was originally a small world, so in ancient times, this world experienced a catastrophe and disappeared. Humans call that period the Jurassic period. Jurassic period, dinosaurs? Tang Zheng's eyes widened. Even a 3-year-old child would have heard of these two words. According to research, it was the impact of a meteorite that caused the extinction of species and the complete disappearance of that world. After countless years of evolution, humans finally appeared in this world. You're saying that the Jurassic era belonged to a small world, and the heavenly axiom operated, so the Jurassic era was annihilated and disappeared? Tang Zheng asked. You guessed right. The so-called meteorite impact is just a method of the heavenly axiom. The heavenly axiom has countless ways to make this small world disappear. The five-clawed golden dragon really did not rest until he was shocked to death. These heavy bombs exploded one after another, causing Tang Zheng's heart to jump out of his throat. Since this world is now a small world, when will it be annihilated? This was the question that Tang Zheng was most concerned about. The five-clawed golden dragon shook his head. How can the heavenly axiom be so easy to predict? So you don't know? Yes. The five-clawed golden dragon nodded. He paused for a moment and said, but it can be annihilated at any time. Tang Zheng's heart tightened and he felt like he couldn't breathe. It turned out that the residents of this world had been living in the shadow of death, but they didn't know it. He felt as small as an ant, and his fate was in the hands of the illusory heavenly axiom. F***ck, too unreliable. He cursed in his heart, his expression uncertain. Then how can I get rid of this imprisonment? Tang Zheng said unwillingly. I don't want my fate to be in the hands of others. Hee, your heart is quite big. Do you want to fight against the heavenly axiom? I advise you to give up on this idea. The heavenly axiom is the world's biggest law. You can't go against it. The five-clawed golden dragon asserted. Don't tell me I'm just going to wait for death. Tang Zheng said hatefully. Of course you don't have to wait for death. You are a cultivator. When your cultivation reaches a certain level, you can break through the shackles of this world. Before this world is annihilated, you can leave this world and live. What about the others? The others? You can't even take care of yourself. How can you have the leisure to care about others? The five-clawed golden dragon said jokingly. Tang Zheng obviously had to care about others. There were many people in this world that he cared about. How could he ignore those people and let them perish with this world? He was not a cold-blooded animal, so of course he couldn't do this. Then is there any other way to prevent this world from being annihilated? Of course there is. Let it become a large world again and occupy the right time and place. The heavenly axiom will naturally not let it be annihilated. Tang Zheng was stunned for a moment, then asked, then how can it become a large world? Raise the power of this world. Since the tree of life has appeared, the spirit energy between heaven and earth will become denser in a very short period of time. This is tailor-made for cultivators, and you are also collecting heaven and earth Xian stones to reforge the heaven stairway and let the cultivators return. Of course, you can increase the strength of this world and advance to a large world again. Let the cultivators return. Tang Zheng hesitated. He had been struggling with this problem. The cultivators were expelled and their hearts were filled with resentment. If they returned, he could not predict what kind of revenge the humans in this world would suffer. Therefore, he did not have the right to make this decision for the lives of others. I don't know much about the sky beyond heaven, but I'm sure that the sky beyond heaven is one of the many worlds. In fact, many worlds are connected and can travel between each other. For example, the people in the ghost realm can travel to this world, and back then, the cultivators were also expelled to the sky beyond heaven by New Era. However, back then, New Era definitely did not think that he would demote this world, and instead let this world walk on the path of no return. Tang Zheng's expression was unsettled. Listening to the news one by one, it was difficult for him to digest it all. Could it be that it was really as the five-clawed golden dragon said, that he only had one way to let the cultivators return? Wasn't this the same as Tian Chanzi's wish all along? For a moment, he was upset and his brows were tightly knitted. The five-clawed golden dragon ignored his troubles and said to himself, didn't you want to ask about the ghost realm? Then you're good. The ghost realm is two worlds that are interdependent with this world. This situation is called the mother and child realm. If one of these two worlds is strong, then the other will definitely be weak. Because, although the two worlds are dependent on each other, they are actually secretly absorbing each other's luck and power. Of course, when the cultivators gather, the power of this world is greater than that of the ghost realm, so the ghost realm has always been suppressed. Although I was imprisoned here and am not very clear about the specific situation of the ghost realm over the years, I can be sure of one thing: the development of the ghost realm in these years must have far surpassed that of this world, and the power of the ghost realm has already surpassed that of this world. At this time, you destroyed the foundation of the ghost realm. How could the ghost realm let you go? I'm afraid they will dig you out even if they have to dig 3 feet into the ground. The five-clawed golden dragon couldn't help but reveal a hint of schadenfreude in his tone, causing Tang Zheng to roll his eyes helplessly. Hey, who are you with? Why do I see that you are very happy to see the ghost realm become stronger? Hee, what are you talking about? In fact, these messy things have nothing to do with me. I'm just a spectator. The five-clawed golden dragon said indifferently. But I want to remind you that the ghost realm is now a big world, and the world you are in is a small world. When the heavenly Tao sends down punishment, this world will disappear, but the ghost realm will be safe and sound. On the contrary, the ghost realm will absorb the luck and all the favorable factors of this world, thus enhancing their strength. Tang Zheng was secretly shocked, silently snorted, and simply ignored the other party. He also temporarily put the matter of the small world and other things to the back of his mind. His top priority now was to figure out how to deal with the ghost realm. Since he had imperceptibly ruined the good things of the ghost realm, then the ghost realm would not let it go and would try their best to find out the situation. After listening to Tang Zheng's request, the five-clawed golden dragon smiled and said, "You want me to teach you how to deal with the ghost realm?" Yes. Tang Zheng was not polite. If I die early, then you won't be able to see the light of day again. We are grasshoppers on the same rope. That's right, then why are you so sure that I have a way to deal with the ghost realm? Tang Zheng was slightly startled. He was desperate before, and was not sure that the five-clawed golden dragon had a way to deal with it. But at this moment, after hearing its words, Tang Zheng immediately concluded that it had a way to deal with it. He was desperate and had actually hit the jackpot. If you have a way, then say it. Don't talk nonsense. Seeing that it was pretending to be profound, Tang Zheng angrily urged. The five-clawed golden dragon sighed helplessly and said, "You are begging me, yet you still have this kind of attitude. If it was before, I would never tell you, but this time I can make an exception for you." Tang Zheng curled his lips. What exception? Wasn't it worried that Tang Zheng would have an accident, then it would have no hope of escaping? You listen to me, kill the people who took the life-prolonging pill and eliminate the hidden dangers of the ghost realm. Naturally, success will come naturally. Kill them. Tang Zheng was incredulous. Was there a mistake? Why would he want to kill those innocent people? Moreover, wasn't his grandfather Tang Dahai one of them? How could he do it? It was ridiculous. He glared fiercely at the five-clawed golden dragon and said in a deep voice, "Can you stop joking? I won't kill those people." The five-clawed golden dragon shook its head and sighed, "You are too soft-hearted. Anyway, they are people who are about to die. If you kill them, naturally no one will suspect you. No. If I say no, it means no." Chapter 595. After a long time, the five-clawed golden dragon slowly opened his eyes and said, "If it was in the past, I wouldn't talk so much nonsense with you. This won't do, that won't do." Tang Zheng was not afraid at all and looked at him proudly. This was a matter of principle, how could he agree so easily? "I really don't know what to do with you, but after thinking hard, I finally found another way." "Don't keep me in suspense, what is it?" Tang Zheng couldn't force him. He urged impatiently, although he used a concealment technique on his grandfather and Nana so that the ghost realm couldn't track the two for the time being. But that was not a long-term solution. He destroyed the foundation of the ghost realm and caused them to lose their soldiers. The ghost realm would definitely try their best to find the culprit. At that time, when Tang Zheng was found, the ghost realm would not just send a few ghost generals or ghost marshals to deal with him, but would definitely send more powerful experts. Tang Zheng might not be able to cope with it. Therefore, he had to plan ahead and completely remove himself from this matter. Let the ghost realm be in chaos, so that they have no time to care about the East, then you will naturally be safe. The five-clawed golden dragon said lightly. Let the ghost realm be in chaos. Tang Zheng's eyes widened, "Do I have such great ability?" "You don't." "Indeed, you didn't, and this method was impossible to succeed in the past. But now, there is a glimmer of hope, and this glimmer of hope is related to you. I really feel that this is the will of the heavens. Could it be that all of this is the arrangement of the heavens? Heaven's will. Don't talk nonsense, tell me quickly what the method is. The tree of life, this method depends on the tree of life. The tree of life is the most original energy of this world. Not only can it transform the spiritual energy and the environment, but it can also absorb the energy of other worlds to supplement this world. Tang Zheng seemed to understand. You mean the tree of life can absorb the energy of the ghost realm and transfer it to this world? Of course, not every world has the tree of life, so the tree of life is very important to a world and must not be damaged. Otherwise, the world's luck will be greatly reduced, and even suffer a disaster. The five-clawed golden dragon said solemnly. Tang Zheng nodded. After absorbing the energy of the world of spirits and souls, will the world of spirits and souls be able to trace the source? Of course not. The miraculous nature of the tree of life is not something that can be traced by humans. Only then did Tang Zheng feel relieved. If the tree of life had absorbed the energy of the ghost realm, it would have caused a commotion in the ghost realm, causing them to have no time to investigate Tang Zheng. This diversion was indeed effective. Then how can the tree of life absorb the energy of the ghost realm? The five-clawed golden dragon smiled mysteriously and explained. Tang Zheng engraved it in his heart, but to use this technique, he had to get close to the tree of life, which meant that he had to go to the desert again. Tang Zheng silently made up his mind to find a time to meet the tree of life as soon as possible. Hee, I'm looking forward to the day when you turn the ghost realm upside down. The five-clawed golden dragon smirked. The next day, he immersed himself in his school life. Even though he was given preferential treatment, he still had to put on an act. He couldn't skip classes so soon after school started. After a day of classes, Tang Zheng returned to his dorm with his roommates. Now that he had Wu, who was like a shadow, he actually liked to stay on campus. Otherwise, she would follow him closely. However, he did not stay idle for too long. Yi Dingdang's roommate, Li Fangfei, called. Li Fangfei and Zhou Yan had officially developed into a couple, and Zhou Yan was unable to resist her pursuit. Li Fangfei asked Tang Zheng if he knew what happened to Yi Dingdang's family. Today, during class, Yi Dingdang was called away by her family. It seemed that her expression was very serious, as if something bad had happened to her family. Something bad? Tang Zheng was startled. The Ye family was one of the few great families. What kind of accident could happen? Moreover, the Chu family's patriarch had fallen, and the other three families had eaten up a portion of the Chu family's business, especially the Song family. Now that the three families were in a stalemate, although the Ye family was still a little weak, with Yi Xuanji as the pillar, the other families did not dare to rashly do anything to the Ye family. Therefore, what could happen to the Ye family? Hearing that Tang Zheng didn't understand, Li Fangfei advised, Tang Zheng, Dingdang cares a lot about you. Now that something big has happened to her family, she must be at her weakest. You should show some concern. Although at first, Li Fangfei didn't think highly of Tang Zheng and Yi Dingdang, and even felt indignant towards Yi Dingdang chasing after Tang Zheng. However, time and time again, reality proved that Tang Zheng was not as simple as he seemed on the surface. In private, Zhou Yan had even said that in the entire 502 dorm, Lao San was the most unfathomable person. His mysteriousness and strength might far surpass the imagination of ordinary people. Li Fangfei already knew that Zhou Yan came from an official's family, and that his father's position was not small. He had been influenced since he was young, and had trained a pair of eyes and ears. Although he didn't usually show it, his heart was like a mirror, and he was very good at judging people. Since he did this, Li Fangfei stopped looking down on Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng was secretly ashamed. During this period of time, he had neglected Yi Dingdang. He had originally planned to meet her when school started, but because of Sinosaurus's matter, it was delayed. Tang Zheng, there's something I have to say. Dingdang has always been a proud girl, but she put down her dignity for you and treated you wholeheartedly, treating you as the center of her world. But from what I can see, your feelings for her have always been erratic, and many of your actions don't seem like what a boyfriend would do to his girlfriend. As a girl, I think that Ding Dang is really pitiful. Li Fangfei took a deep breath and said. Pitiful? Tang Zheng suddenly froze, stunned by these two words. Was my behavior really that bad? He couldn't help but recall the bits and pieces of Yi Dingdang, and suddenly, he realized that Li Fangfei had hit the nail on the head. He was very concerned about Yi Dingdang, and didn't even ask her to watch a movie or go to the library to read. In short, they didn't do anything that a normal couple should do. Even he, Fang Shishir and Lu Qingmei didn't do anything that a couple should do. In addition, during the process of the two of them getting along, it was mostly Yi Dingdang who took the initiative, and even tirelessly chased after him. He had always been used to it, but now that he thought about it, he realized how difficult it was for a girl to do this. I understand, thank you. Tang Zheng said solemnly. If you know, you have to take action. Do you understand? Li Fangfei warned. Understood. Tang Zheng's reply was firm and decisive. Since he had to take action, he naturally had to carry it out immediately. Without hesitation, he left the school and went straight to the Ye family. Although he knew that he wasn't welcomed in the Ye family, Yi Dingdang had done so much for him. What was the big deal if he went to the Ye family and suffered a little? Yi Dingdang had always insisted on being together with him despite the opposition of the majority of the Yi clan. Thus, him coming to the Yi clan without any hesitation was a response and support to her actions. She would definitely be happy. When Tang Zheng arrived at the entrance of the Ye family, he felt an unusual atmosphere. Stop right there. A person stopped him. Her almond-shaped eyes were wide open as she glared at him, like an angry lioness. Tang Zheng stopped in his tracks, looked at her calmly, and said, Yi Meiyu, move aside, I want to see Ding Dang. Yi Meiyu looked at him with a complicated expression. She had once thought of seducing Tang Zheng, but Tang Zheng did not take the bait. Instead, he got together with Yi Dingdang. This made her deeply suspicious of her own charm. Could it be that she couldn't compare to Yi Dingdang, that young girl? What did she know? Did she know men? Why didn't this Tang Zheng look straight at her, but instead looked at that young girl in a different light? She felt a deep sense of defeat. As a result, she naturally did not have the slightest good impression of Tang Zheng. Just now, when the servant saw Tang Zheng walking over from afar, he immediately turned around to inform her, and she coincidentally bumped into him. That was why she rushed over in a hurry to see what Tang Zheng was going to do. This is the Ye family, you can't see whoever you want, and it's not up to you to decide. Yi Meiyu said without any trace of politeness. Tang Zheng slightly frowned, and said, What exactly happened to the Ye family? No. Nothing. Yi Meiyu said hesitantly. Seeing that, Tang Zheng's heart trembled. Something must have happened to the Ye family, otherwise, the usually arrogant and despotic Yi Meiyu would not have such a reaction. I don't care about the Ye family, I only care about Ding Dang. Although this is the Ye family, it's still her home. You can't make the decision for her. With that, Tang Zheng walked towards the door with large strides. Yi Meiyu wanted to stop her, but it was no different from a mantis trying to stop a chariot. After being lightly bumped into by Tang Zheng, she staggered backwards and almost fell down. After making a fool of herself in front of the servants, she flew into a rage and shouted arrogantly, Stop him. Don't let him step into the Ye family. The servants all surrounded them. Many of them were martial warriors nurtured by the Ye family. If they were placed outside, their strength would be extraordinary, but in front of Tang Zheng, they were like babies, unable to pose the slightest threat. However, this way, it would be a big battle. With swords drawn, the servants clamored and were about to charge forward. Suddenly, a loud shout exploded, like a clap of thunder, Who dares to barge into the Ye family? Everyone's eardrums vibrated, and many of the servants covered their ears, revealing a pained expression. However, Tang Zheng's expression did not change, and when he looked up, a somewhat familiar face entered his sight. This familiarity was not because he knew Tang Zheng, but because his facial features gave Tang Zheng a sense of familiarity. This was because Tang Zheng could tell at a glance that he was Yi Xuanji's other son, the eldest of the Ye family, Yi Tianming. Yi Tianming was more like Yi Tianlei than Yi Tianlei, especially the expression between his eyebrows, which was exactly the same. Yi Tianming walked over with a majestic gait, and the servants all stepped aside to make way for him. Yi Tianming stared at Tang Zheng with an unfriendly expression and scolded, "Who are you?" Tang Zheng was not afraid at all. Although he had never seen Yi Tianming before, he did not believe that Yi Tianming would not recognize him. He had caused such a huge commotion in the capital, and he had a close relationship with Yi Tianlei. He did not believe that Yi Tianming had not investigated him. Since the other party asked the obvious, Tang Zheng did not have the mood to talk, and said indifferently, "I came to find Ding Dang. I don't want to cause trouble, but I don't mind causing trouble." Chapter 596. Tang Zheng's tough attitude made Yi Tianming frown. Although there were many rumors about Tang Zheng, Yi Tianming did not really take Tang Zheng seriously. Moreover, this was the Ye family. Yi Tianming took a step forward and said in a low voice, "If you don't know what's good for you, then don't blame me for being rude." Yi Tianming was about to make a move. Tang Zheng was ready to fight. A conflict was about to break out. "Handsome." Feng Xinyang's voice rang out. She walked over quickly and asked, "Why are you here?" Tang Zheng turned his head and said, "I'm here to look for Ding Dang." "Feng Xinyang, the Ye family is not a place where anyone can barge in," Yi Tianming said with a straight face. Feng Xinyang frowned coldly. She had been dissatisfied with Yi Tianming for a long time. She was disgusted by his words and retorted coldly, "He is my guest." "Humph, the Ye family does not welcome him." Yi Tianming frowned even more when he saw Feng Xinyang contradicting him. Feng Xinyang did not say anything. She grabbed Tang Zheng and walked inside. "Feng Xinyang, what are you doing? Do you think this family is not messy enough?" Yi Tianming shouted angrily. Feng Xinyang did not even turn her head and said, "Can't I even receive my own guest? I think you think this family is not messy enough and are deliberately stirring up trouble." Feng Xinyang had a fiery temper and was outspoken. Since she came to the Ye family in the capital, she had been restraining her temper. At this moment, she could not help but explode. In front of so many servants, Yi Tianming's dignity was seriously challenged. He could not help but clench his fist and said, "Feng Xinyang, you forced me to do this." Since returning from abroad, Yi Tianming also found that many people in the family had a huge change in attitude towards Yi Tianlei. Yi Tianming was very wary of this sudden competitor for the position of the clan head. This time, Feng Xinyang had contradicted him in front of everyone, and everyone had seen it. If he didn't do anything, then the prestige he had built up over the years would be greatly reduced. In addition, some of the opportunists would gradually side with Yi Tianlei, which was something he absolutely did not want to see. Therefore, this time, he wanted to establish his authority and establish his prestige in the Ye family. Especially after such a big incident happened in the Ye family, he wanted to establish his unshakable position and let everyone know that in the Ye family, other than Yi Xuanji, he, Yi Tianming, was the one who made the decisions. Yi Tianming's mind was full of thoughts, but Feng Xinyang did not know. But to be honest, she did not care about what he thought. She was certain that whoever embarrassed Tang Zheng in front of her was disgracing her, Feng Xinyang. She would never sit back and do nothing. Feng Xinyang stopped and turned to face Yi Tianming. She said, "What do you want? I'll accompany you to the end." Yi Tianming's eyes were filled with anger. This was a public provocation. If he did not suppress this, it would be more difficult for him in the future. "Then don't blame me for being impolite." His feet slipped, and he suddenly appeared in front of Feng Xinyang. After Feng Xinyang came to the capital, she had a breakthrough and reached the second grade of the innate realm. But compared with Yi Tianming, she was still inferior. Yi Tianming did not show mercy this time. He was determined to teach Feng Xinyang a lesson as an example to others, establishing his authority. Just as Feng Xinyang was about to retaliate, another vigorous figure was faster than her and stood in front of her to protect her. He lightly said, "Aunt Feng, let me deal with this kind of person. There is no need for you to make your presence known." He pushed out a palm with one hand. It was plain and simple, but the palm force was restrained. Bang! When the two palms came into contact, Tang Zheng did not move an inch. Yi Tianming retreated 3 steps. His heel tapped on the ground and only stopped when he stepped on the stone floor. But the stone floor under his feet was like a spider web, cracking inch by inch. Yi Tianming was shocked and his cheeks flushed red. He took a deep breath and suppressed the inner strength in his heart. "Stop, stop fighting." Yi Tianlei rushed out and shouted in shock. Tang Zheng remained calm and greeted Yi Tianlei, "Uncle Yi, I'm looking for Ding Dang." Yi Tianlei's face was complicated. He nodded and said, "This is all a misunderstanding. Everyone stop. Little Zheng, why are you looking for Ding Dang? I heard that she was called back while she was still in class. I was worried that something happened to her, so I came to take a look." Hearing these words, Feng Xinyang was overjoyed. She thought to herself that this girl's luck with men was finally here. Since this little handsome boy actually took the initiative to come and see her, then sooner or later she would take him down. Truly worthy of being my, Feng Xinyang's, seed. Yi Tianlei did not have such thoughts. He said in a deep voice, "Father suddenly fainted. We are looking for doctors everywhere." With Yi Xuanji's cultivation and strength, this kind of situation would not happen for no reason. So, when Tang Zheng heard this, he was shocked. Yi Tianming regained his senses and caught the flaw in Yi Tianlei's words. He sternly scolded, "Tianlei, how can you tell an outsider about this?" The news of Yi Xuanji's coma was strictly controlled within the Ye family. No one dared to spread it because this news would cause a commotion and negatively affect the Ye family. Xiao Zheng is not an outsider, Yi Tianlei argued, but he could not tell Yi Tianming that his father escaped death and broke through to the supreme power realm because he took Tang Zheng's life-prolonging pill. Therefore, it was not a disgraceful act to tell Tang Zheng about Yi Xuanji's situation. On the contrary, Yi Tianlei thought that he should tell him. Although Yi Tianming was shocked by Tang Zheng's strength, Yi Tianlei's appearance helped him out. Otherwise, he would not know what to do. In addition, his perception of Tang Zheng had undergone a complete change. He had underestimated him too much in the past. Suddenly, his hostility to Tang Zheng became stronger. Yi Tianlei had such a big help. Of course, he could not ignore it. Yi Tianming suppressed his anger and asked his subordinate next to him, "Has the person sent to invite the King of Medicine back?" "He just came back, but the King of Medicine is not in the capital. It is said that he went on a long journey." The subordinate reported nervously. "A long journey?" Yi Tianming's face stiffened. Yi Tianlei looked at Tang Zheng and said, "Big brother, the King of Medicine and Xiao Zheng have a close relationship. Since the King of Medicine is not here, why not let Xiao Zheng try?" The relationship between Tang Zheng and the King of Medicine was too complicated. When the King of Medicine appeared at the auction, he publicly admitted that Tang Zheng was his master. This made many people surprised. Many people were skeptical, but there was no doubt that Tang Zheng and the King of Medicine had a close relationship. What ability does a young boy have? Continue to send people to find the King of Medicine. We must bring him to the capital as soon as possible. Yi Tianming said disapprovingly. Time waits for no one. I think that we should let Xiao Zheng try. Yi Tianlei retorted. If I say he can't, then he can't. If he can't cure father, who will be responsible? Yi Tianming said unhappily. He was determined to control the situation. I believe in him. Yi Tianlei said stubbornly. Tang Zheng had created too many miracles, so he subconsciously thought that Tang Zheng might be able to create another miracle. Yi Tianming heard this and still did not give in. Tang Zheng frowned. He did not understand the situation. These two brothers were arguing so fiercely. Was it necessary? Just as he was about to interject, he felt a cold and gloomy feeling descend from the sky. He subconsciously looked up. The sky was completely dark. The haze in the capital was not small. It was impossible to see the night sky. But Tang Zheng saw many different things. The dark sky was emitting a strange force, enveloping the Ye family's mansion. Yin Qi. Tang Zheng instantly recognized this strange force. It was too familiar. But the key point was, how could the Ye family be enveloped by such a strong Yin Qi? This did not make sense at all. In the past, Tang Zheng had been to the Ye family. The Ye family's Yang Qi was very strong. It was a place with good feng shui. It was one with the fate of the capital. It was impossible for such a strong Yin Qi to appear. There must be something wrong with this abnormal situation. Seeing him look up at the sky as if he was scared silly, the others turned their gaze and looked at him suspiciously. "Little handsome, what's wrong?" Feng Xinyang patted his shoulder and asked with concern. "What happened to Yishuanji?" Tang Zheng asked in a deep voice. He did not care about Yishuanji's life or death. But with such a strong Yin Qi appearing in the Ye family, he had to pay attention. Hearing him call Yishuanji's name, Yi Tianming was furious. "Tianlei, what did you hear from him? He is so rebellious." Yi Tianlei coughed awkwardly and advised, "Big brother, little Zheng must have found something. Let's listen to him first." "What's there to listen to? What can he possibly say? This person came to the Ye family to make trouble. If father was here, he would definitely drive him out of the Ye family. He would never listen to his nonsense." Yi Tianming said righteously. The meaning of his words was quite deep. He was accusing Yi Tianlei of going against the wishes of the old man. This was disrespectful and unfilial. Many people nodded, apparently agreeing with Yi Tianming's words. Yi Tianlei fell into a passive state, but he still stubbornly said, "Little Zheng is more powerful than you think." Moreover, the medicine king revered little Zheng as his master, so his medical skills are definitely out of the ordinary. Father's illness cannot be delayed. If little Zheng has a way, then wouldn't everyone be happy? After saying that, he directly invited Tang Zheng to the Ye family's backyard. Yi Tianming's expression kept changing. He said in a deep voice, "Then I want to see how long he can play tricks." Yi Tianming did not believe that Tang Zheng could save Yishuanji. After all the famous doctors in the capital had diagnosed Yishuanji. They all said that Yishuanji's condition was rare and they could not diagnose the cause. Yi Tianming did not believe that Tang Zheng was more powerful than those divine doctors at such a young age. Since Yi Tianlei was so stubborn, then he would make a fool of himself. Later on, he would hit him when he was down and fiercely attack his arrogance and prestige. Along the way, Tang Zheng frowned. Especially when he stepped into the small courtyard where Yishuanji lived, he felt a chill. A cold feeling instantly enveloped his body and mind. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.